Was the greediest thing you've seen a family member do? 1. My dad had a brother, Huck, whom he was especially close to. Unfortunately, my uncle Huck died of a massive heart attack in his 40s, leaving his wife to raise their 3 children. Things were really tough for her financially. My grandmother, Huck and Dad's mom, felt very bad for her and told the family that when she passed, she wanted her furniture and things to go to Huck's widow, hoping that it might help them in some way. When she died, her 2 daughters, who lived in separate apartments in the same house as my grandmother, stripped her apartment bare and kept everything for themselves. When my dad found out, he went ballistic and laid his sisters out in lavender. Since Huck died, he had kept in close touch with his widow and acted as kind of a surrogate father to the kids, so he was very protective of them. His sisters, of course, didn't take kindly to my dad calling them out as thieves and stealing from the grave, and this caused a huge rift in the family, and we only saw them rarely after that. But I'm proud of my father for standing up for what was right. 2. My dad's elder brother lived with us since I was 4, had a grumpy side, but he was still a very nice person. I didn't get to know the reason he lived with us until I was a teenager. My dad told me that he caught his wife with another man on his matrimonial bed and she never apologized. He left the house and never went back, although he sends child support. He tried all his possible best to remain in contact with his kids, but they didn't want to, so he let them be. He was like my second father. I washed his clothes, ironed them, and also ran errands for him. I gained admission into the university and I saw him only on holidays. When I was in my second year, he got really sick and bedridden. My dad contacted his wife and kids, but they wanted nothing to do with him. He literally had no one else, so we took care of him. My dad paid his hospital bills and my family members took turns attending to his very basic needs. He didn't survive it, though we lost him. My dad also took charge of everything and laid him to rest. That was when they started calling my dad incessantly, asking him to give them his bank details. My uncle's eldest son asked for his will and pension. Sadly, my uncle had none. Till date, I can't really wrap my head around the fact that family members can be this greedy. It's really disheartening. 3. I had a friend called Peter. He was gay and shared a house with his ex. They hadn't been together for years but were still close. Peter bought half his ex's house when his ex got into financial difficulty, and took out mortgage insurance. Peter caught a very aggressive strain of HIV and died within 6 months, so the mortgage was paid off. The funeral was a nightmare despite Peter being no contact with his family after they disowned him for being gay. The vicar only talked to his parents. They didn't talk to his ex at all despite living together for around 20 years. Next of kin is next of kin when you aren't married, I suppose. So none of Peter's life or friends were mentioned or celebrated. It was all about his grieving parents. One thing that still sticks in my mind all these years later is when he said, "And Jesus was nailed to the cross, surrounded by thieves, murderers, child molesters and criminals. If Jesus could forgive them and they could enter the kingdom of heaven, then there's hope for Peter." There was an audible gasp in the church at that point, and some people half stood up in anger. The wake was at the house and the parents and a brother were wandering round with a notepad. And when asked what they were doing, they said they were cataloging everything, as the house and all its contents were now half theirs. They smirked as they said to the ex, "Don't worry. When we get home, we'll organize selling the house so you can start getting your crap out before the sale. We just want to make sure you don't hide the valuables before we got our half." I was there and heard every word. The room went silent and the ex went to the safe and pulled out a document. "This is Peter's will. I was going to read it later but might as well do it now." Basically, Peter had left everything to his ex: house, car, bank accounts and insurance policy, and small bequests to close friends. I got a series of books I'd told him I loved after borrowing them to read, Tales of the City if you are interested. And to my parents, brother and sister, I leave them what they gave me in life. Nothing. They treated me like garbage from the age of 15 and I officially disinherit all of them, was what I remember. They stormed out in a rage and were never heard from again. The ex said they did apparently seek legal advice, but as they were mentioned in the will and purposefully left nothing, they couldn't claim they were forgotten, so couldn't contest the will. In the UK you don't have to leave family anything, but it's wise if they are close family to state outright so your intentions are clear. 4. It wasn't my family member, but I witnessed this. An adult daughter was literally yelling at her mother for buying new furniture because the mother was spending her inheritance. The daughter then had the nerve to turn to me and ask, "Isn't it bullshit?" I replied, "It certainly is that an adult daughter thinks she is entitled to her mother's money and could presume to chastise her mother for spending her own money. If I was your mother, I would have responded, 'Don't worry, honey, you don't have an inheritance.'" She looked at me as if I had 2 heads. 5. 13 years after my dad died, we were notified that his father purchased land in another state, now owned by his children. A gas well was drilled on the property. Since my dad had died, his portion went to his 3 children. This is where the greedy part comes in. My mom heard about this, I assume from my sister. She discovered that only us kids got to divide my dad's portion. This news pissed her off to no end. Immediately, she got an attorney and demanded her share of the gas lease. When the company that drilled the gas well communicates with the family, they copy everyone. This is how I learned that my mom hired an attorney to ensure she got a piece of the pie. I have been no contact with my narcissistic mother for 15 years. My mom took me out of her will years ago. She wanted to make sure I didn't get too much. My mom's actions were out of revenge and greed. If she couldn't get it all, then she was going to make sure that I didn't get more money than her. Here is the best part. After years of waiting, my husband and I finally got a big check. One day, out of the blue, we received an envelope which we thought was another letter about the gas lease. After opening the envelope we could see it was a check. We were in disbelief, our jaws dropped. We could barely contain our excitement. As we looked at the numbers on the check, our minds began to wonder about the amount that was on my mom's check. This was unreal. It was like no other point in our lives. This check changed our lives. It was the answer to our prayers. It proved to us the existence of karma. After my husband and I calmed down, we started discussing how and where we would spend our $35. But more importantly, we laughed all the way to the bank, thinking about how much money my mom spent on an attorney to get a check that was less than $50. It was the best check we had ever received. My dad's share of the lease was 1/8. Since he had passed, his 3 kids would split that into 3 equal portions. From what we can tell, mom got half of dad's share and left the other half to be split into thirds. In the comments people say that my mom is entitled to my dad's share. I agree, yes she is, but the way she went about it was based on anger, revenge, and manipulation. I would have gladly given her my share if she'd asked. The last time my mom and I talked it was on this issue. I told her if I got any money from this I would put it in savings for my son, her grandson, who has a neurological disease. She decided to get the money for herself, which meant that she was so mad at me that she would take money from her grandson. 6. My grandmother had Alzheimer's but for a time was still able to live in her home with my dad coming to help her twice a day. One day she told my dad that her stepson and his family, who lived about 6 hours away, came to the house and loaded up huge leaf trash bags with all of her quilts and antiques and valuables. Even though she sometimes told stories that weren't true, this was definitely the truth. They literally took everything they wanted, not just the valuable stuff. They literally stripped her house of everything except her clothes and furniture and some kitchen items and bath towels. My dad didn't even confront his stepbrother. He just let it go. My grandmother was upset for a short time but then forgot it ever happened. The only thing my mother and I cared about was the quilts. We would have liked to have had just 1 or 2 of her many beautiful quilts she made. They could have had all of the others. My grandmother owned 2 houses. She lived in one and rented out the second. She left 1 house to my dad and 1 house to her stepson. It was really sad that the stepson felt he and his family needed to come take everything from my grandmother while she was still living and fairly lucid. But people are strange sometimes. The one silver lining about this situation was how easy it was to clean out her house after she died so that it could be sold. We donated her clothes and few possessions that were left and that was it. 7. That would be my brother when our mother died. From here on I will refer to her as my mother because he does not deserve any claim on her. My parents were in their late 70s when they decided to sell their house. They wanted to move into subsidized county housing so they needed to get rid of some assets because you aren't allowed to have more than a certain amount in available cash assets. They talked to my sisters and me about gifting the majority of what they got for the house to my brother, who seemed like the most trustworthy of us at the time. My sisters and I have never been good with money and I have tried very hard. We agreed that it seemed like the best option. The money would be placed in 2 money market accounts, one for him and one for his wife, with the stipulation that if they needed money it would be available to them and it was our inheritance. My dad died when he was 82 and mom had a rough few weeks when she got things a little confused. My sister and her daughter helped keep her on track so her bills and things were taken care of. My brother, on the other hand, tried to portray mom as being incompetent. She moved from the apartment where she and dad lived into one of the county apartments that they originally wanted to get into and she flourished. Until one day she had a gallbladder attack and had to have emergency surgery. She developed a post-op infection and nearly died. On the worst day, my sisters and I were gathered around her bed and she kept asking for my brother. It took hours for him to get there. Weeks later, after she recovered and was at home, she got her bank statement. She and my brother had a joint account so if anything happened to her he could take care of arrangements without problems and could pay her bills if she was hospitalized. He had cleaned out her bank account except for a small amount and an investigation showed he had moved the money to an account in a new credit union in his and his wife's name. She immediately took his name off her account and wrote a new will. The old one had been written when I was a child and he was the executor as well as my guardian. The new will made my niece executor. That started a war that went on after she died. She added a codicil weeks before she died explaining the gifted money she and my father had given him and her desire that it should be divided between the 4 of us. When the will was read by her attorney my brother sat there and said, "No, the money is mine." Then it came out that the 2 money market accounts were closed and the money was in an annuity. He had effectively stolen it from his 3 sisters. One sister took his side and agreed that the money was his, even though my mother said it wasn't. I don't care about the money. There wasn't enough to really do anything with it. What upset me was the years of abuse mom suffered from him and then he committed the ultimate act of disrespect to her. This is the scariest example of medical negligence you've seen. 1. I had my first child at 21. When he was 4 weeks old he developed large white blisters all over his lower half and I immediately took him to casualty. They said it was nappy rash and I stated that it absolutely was not nappy rash. They told me I was a young and inexperienced mother and should just listen to them. I stated that I was one of 6 children and had 29 nephews and nieces and that I'd been around kids my entire life. I went home but my son got worse and I ended up in casualty no fewer than 5 times in 24 hours, each time ending in a massive row. They even threatened to call the piss on me. Fortunately a doctor finally agreed to see my baby. He had a temperature of 106 and the doctor said he was an hour from death with septicemia. They stripped him, opened all the windows, this was December, and put a fan on him. He was lucky, he survived with no permanent damage, but I've never trusted doctors since. 2. My dad was an extremely healthy guy. I don't remember him ever missing work, being sick, or any of the things my mom and us kids fell ill with. So when he noticed a change to his bowel habits that was listed as one of the cancer signs, unbeknownst to any of our family, he went to the family doc. All his brothers and sisters did, an older fellow that had seen them since they all were teenagers. The doc told him not to worry, probably was just a little blood from hemorrhoids, and told him to buy an ointment for it. A year or so later it was still there, so dad went back and was told to eat more fiber. When he then noticed several months later the stools becoming narrow, he went back again. The doc asked if he had upped his fiber, and when dad said yes, he asked him if he drank enough water. Dad said he drank Pepsi and the doc said he needed water, not soda, so dad started to drink water too and went back home with his worries gone. After all, the doc told him it was nothing to worry about. When finally in 2000, 4 years after his first visit and still having symptoms after doing all the doc told him to do, he asked if he shouldn't have a colonoscopy. He was told he should watch it for 6 more months, and if he still had trouble, the doc would order one. When dad went back 6 months later and finally had the colonoscopy, it found stage 4 colon cancer that had broken through the intestinal wall. Dad had surgery immediately, followed by horrible chemo over the next several months. After that he did okay for a few months, but when he started having bleeding again and went in for surgery, it was found that the cancer had metastasized to most of his stomach and liver. He died in the hospital 5 days after that surgery. I stayed with him non-stop for those 5 days and nights, watching him get weaker and weaker. It was then he told me he had thought he had cancer at his first visit to the doctor, but the doc kept telling him he was being silly. He died 4 days after his 70th birthday in 2001. He was my hero and mentor. A lazy physician who just wanted to tell my dad everything was fine rarer than doing his job, killed my dad. I try not to think about the if-onlys, as it does no good. Dad was from the generation that thought of doctors as gods. This doctor may have thought his MD stood for minor deity, but his lack of care showed him as the worst kind of doctor. The rest of the story: after dad died, I went back to school and became a healthcare provider myself. And yes, I am known as the one that calls BS on docs that get a little too full of themselves. I think dad is proud of me. 3. My mother had severe stomach pain, acid reflux, for years. The doctor told her it was housewife's stomach and told her to see a psychiatrist. Finally my stepfather made her go see a different doctor. He quickly diagnosed stage 4 stomach cancer. She died in agony and terror a few weeks later. If I wasn't a sane person, I would have killed the evil monster. 4. In 2022, my mom had a second knee replacement. This is a very common surgery, and everything went well. A couple days later, my mom came home. I immediately knew something was wrong when my dad and I were trying to get her out of the truck and into the wheelchair. She couldn't stay awake. She acted drunk, and had a hard time using her legs, and she couldn't seem to hold a thought in her head long enough to express it. My dad told me that they had given her something for the ride home, so I just kind of blew it off as the side effects of analgesics. We finally got her in the house, and put her in bed to sleep it off. About 3 hours later, I came in to check on her before I turned in, and she was still mostly unresponsive. On a hunch, I checked her SPO2 levels and her SAT was 66. Not good at all. So I, forcefully woke her up and had her take some deep breaths, but her SATs only corrected to about 86. I called 911, had her taken to the ER where she was placed on oxygen and monitored for a few days. Turns out that, when she was in hospital, she had been given high doses of Talwin for pain, and the drug they gave her for her trip home was gabapentin, a medication she regularly takes, but had not been taking while in the hospital. The combination of Talwin and gabapentin almost killed her by combining to cause an overdose of opioids. Someone dropped the ball. I raised hell up and down the hospital hierarchy. The incident, however, did not go unaddressed. It is still under investigation, but the hospital has made changes about medication interaction awareness and distribution accountability. And more will follow, I am told. 5. I had to have a partial hysterectomy when I was 35 due to cervical cancer. I had 4 children. The oldest turned 14 while I was in the hospital and the youngest was 4 years old. A couple of days after the surgery, I started running a high fever. Really high, but for some reason, when the nurse took it, she said it was normal. She ignored both me and my mom and was rude and dismissive, even though I was burning up and getting very sick. Finally, in the middle of the night, I called my doctor's answering service. The doctor on call was at the hospital in about 15 minutes and wheeled me to an exam room. Turns out, I was septic and could have lost my life. My husband would have been left to raise 4 kids on his own, and my kids would have grown up without their mother if I hadn't made that call. Mom and I heard that doctor yelling at that nurse from all the way down the hall. Never saw her again. 6. One of the most tragic I've witnessed happened to my godmother's son. He was 36, and a husband and father of 4. He started having abdominal pain. When it got to the point where he couldn't stand it anymore, he went to the ER. The doctors did a CT and ran blood work. They told him that he was low on potassium and to go home and eat a few bananas. They treated him as if he were drug seeking. He went home, ate some bananas and took Advil. 2 days later, he was in such pain his wife took him to the hospital closest to their home. It's a different hospital than the one he first went to. In the ER, they could see that he had just been seen at another facility, so they pulled his CT and blood results. What they found was an aortic rupture. He had been bleeding from his aorta for almost a week. The doctors took him back for emergency surgery to repair it. He died during surgery. The doctor was absolutely furious at the other hospital. He actually told us that missing the rupture should not have happened and that we should sue. He requested all the chart notes from the other hospital and went over them in his own time and pointed out the mistakes they had made. He even came to Lawrence's funeral. My godmother obviously was devastated. She even took her gun out of the lockbox to go and deliver her own brand of justice. We were able to talk her down. We sued and are going on year 3 now, so I don't know what's going to happen, but I seriously hope he loses everything, including his house, his car, the change under his sofa cushions all the way down to the horse he rode in on. His quickness to dismiss it all as drug-seeking cost Lawrence his life. Such a waste. 7. My grandson was in a car accident when he was 4. He had surgery for a head wound. His mother and baby sister were hospitalized also, so I came to be with him because they had the kids on different floors. As they were transporting him into a pediatric room, I noticed he had a horrible kind of cough. I'm concerned and asked the nurses moving him to let his doctor know. She tells me it's normal, he just needs to cough it up. We are in the room and they had removed his catheter. So ask if he wants to read or play. He says yes, gets up and he starts to sway. I caught him, carried him to bed, hit the call button. Nurse comes in, Hess making a raspy noise. She says it's normal after being sedated so long. Another family member gets there to sit with him while I go home, shower and pack a bag for the next couple days. As I was walking in my door 15 minutes later, the family called saying he had quit breathing. I rushed back to the hospital. The nurse had insisted she put drops in the eye he had surgery on. His mom and sister were now in room next door. Instead of letting someone calm him, she chased him out of the playroom down the hall. He jumped on his mom's bed. The nurse grabbed him to do the drops, but Hess pale and making weird noise. She starts to walk away. His mom is screaming, Hess not breathing. Nurse, yes, kids do that, and walks out. Everyone is calling for help, but she is talking and laughing on the cell phone, turns her back and walks away. A nurse from 2 halls away heard them and came running. She calls Code Blue and a team worked on him for 18 minutes, finally got him intubated. A doctor spoke to us and said he had been without oxygen to his brain for 20 plus minutes. He developed stridor, his throat swole and cut off his airway. So if the nurse would have done what I asked and told the doctor or known what the hell she was doing, a simple shot would have reversed the effects. She delayed emergency response by 4 or more minutes. That can be the difference between life and death. He has a traumatic brain injury, can no longer talk, Hess 13 now and must wear diapers. I love him with all my heart. There was a lawsuit and during the trial she actually rolled her eyes when asked why she didn't respond when he wasn't breathing. Or why she didn't tell someone about the stridor sounds he'd been making all day. Of course the hospital lost the case. But a vibrant, intelligent child will suffer the rest of his life because a nurse on pediatric floor at St. Francis Children's Hospital in Tulsa didn't do her job and then delayed help because she needed to talk her mom in time for break. Is the scariest example of medical negligence you've seen. 1. When my son Garrett was 2 years old, he started complaining about belly and back pain when his legs were raised to change his diaper. I took him to the HMO pediatrician that took my insurance. He was, the doctor said, just wanting attention. I was told to take his bottle and pacifier away and sit him in the corner when he cried. I switched him to a sippy cup, let him keep his pacifier, and he was comforted when he cried. He never sat in the corner. He got worse. You could visualize his liver, it was so swollen. Back to the doctor who said to take dairy out of his diet and place on brat diet. He got worse and developed bilateral bruising in both eyes. Back to the doctor who said he had no idea what caused that and didn't offer to research it for the diagnosis. I requested a specialist, got denied. He ordered tests but then canceled them all. He was misdiagnosed 7 times and when he became paralyzed from the waist down we went to ER. He was admitted, and the next morning he went into surgery to have a tumor removed from his adrenal gland. Afterwards, I was told he had neuroblastoma, had no chance of survival but treatment would put him in remission and give him more time. He got chemotherapy and radiation and was in clinical trials. He had the rarest childhood cancer worldwide and most children didn't live to see 4. He did go into remission but when on his wish trip it came back. In his blood, bones, and tumors in both eye sockets. He died at the age of 4. At home in my lap with hospice there for support. The funeral home was called and when they got there he had to force me to hand him over. I buried him with his dinosaurs and Power Rangers and wanted to climb in the coffin with him. He would be 25 years old now, and the grief never lessens or goes away. It's with me every day and still can bring me to my knees. 2. I was 6 months pregnant with a very healthy pregnancy. I went to get out of the car, which was not difficult at 6 months along. I swung my legs out and my feet touched the ground, then all of a sudden I was hysterically crying, snot pouring out of my nose, screaming in pain. Pain level 9. My husband got me to the ER where I kept yelling at everyone that it hurt above my uterus and it wasn't pregnancy related. Up to the maternity ward they take me despite my insistence that it wasn't pregnancy related. I laid flat on my back and pain eased up to tolerable. Pain level 5. Red flag. A 6-month pregnant woman won't want to lie flat on her back. The baby checked out fine just as I knew he would. This same scenario happened 8 times over the next month and a half and no one would listen that it was not pregnancy related. Finally on that 8th time I was admitted because now I'm seen as a pain meds seeker and they wanted to do an early delivery because I'm now an unfit mother. Keep in mind that I have declined pain meds every single time they were offered. I wouldn't be able to describe my symptoms if they covered them up with pain meds. A new sonographer comes into my hospital room to do a long ultrasound to make sure the baby is making breathing motions so they could deliver early via C-section. This is my third kid and I've only delivered vaginally. Before she came in I could hear the nurses telling her how I was just after pain meds and they were going to have a social worker take the baby as soon as it was born. So at this point I'm horrified. My mom, husband and 13-year-old daughter had just stepped out to get something to eat, so I was alone when I overheard the evil nurses. The sonographer gets set up with her machine and looks at me in the most loving and caring way and asks about my pain. I tell her everything because I'm distraught, angry and confused. I need to let it all out. I tell her no one has even examined the area in pain and it's been over a month. She asked if she can try to see something with the ultrasound. Yes, please! ! She puts the wand above my uterus, squints at the screen and says, "What is that?" Then she says, "Bear down." So I did and she completely freaked out. Ran out to the nurse's station and proceeded to yell very loudly at all the nurses about negligence and how could they do this to another human being. It turned out that an internal incision from having my gallbladder removed had ripped open and my intestines were bulging. I finally got to see a general surgeon and get some answers. He left my room door open so I could hear him chew out the nursing staff and my midwife. It was glorious. I delivered at 40 weeks with a very easy labor and delivery. The baby was perfectly healthy. The surgeon repaired the hernia and life is good again. 3. I had a 38-pound ovarian cyst removed when I was 16. You read that right? 38 pounds. The surgeon drained a total of 5 gallons of fluid, 18 liters, and reduced it to the size of a basketball before removing it along with one of my ovaries. The negligence wasn't on his part. It was a couple years before the surgery when I visited an urgent care clinic because of the severe pain I was experiencing during my menstrual cycle. The nurse practitioner barely examined me and gave me a prescription for IBS and sent me on my way. My poor dad, who was raising 2 girls on his own, didn't think to question the diagnosis since female puberty wasn't his strong suit. I just dealt with the pain and tried to lose weight. People were always asking me if I was pregnant. 2 years later, I was one of 7 passengers in a 4-door sedan that was involved in a high-speed accident. No one was seriously injured because we were packed in like sardines. But my dad wanted me to go get checked out anyway. The nurse at the ER thought I was pregnant, and I said, "Unless I'm the next Virgin Mary, there's no way I'm pregnant." She didn't believe me and made me get an ultrasound and that's when they found it. 2 weeks later, I had surgery. I was told that even though it was benign, it would have crushed all my organs within a year. It started when I was about 11 so, for 5 years, it just kept growing. I didn't realize how much pain I was in until it was gone. That car accident saved my life. 4. My mother's. She kept going to the on-site clinic at the university where she worked as a janitor, where all of the employees were encouraged to go because of lower co-pays. She was having pains in her arms and back that kept getting worse. She would call me, telling me, not really complaining, as that wasn't her way, that it was a strange pain that was all the way to the bones. Her PCP was a young, male doctor. I've never met him, but I like to imagine he had a handsome, punchable face. Every time she went in, he and the nurses would laugh off my mom's concerns. "You're not getting any younger, you know. Here are some NSAIDs, it's just arthritis." This went on for months, even when my mom would tell them that the pain was so bad she couldn't physically turn the steering wheel in her car. No blood work, no x-rays. Finally, it got so bad my sister convinced her to go to urgent care. One x-ray showed her bones lit up like Christmas with tumors. Stage 4 multiple myeloma, over 95% of her bone marrow involved, the most aggressive genetic variant. Over 2 years, she underwent 5 stem cell transplants, lost all her vitality, became a shell of the woman who had navigated a lifetime of trauma and abuse with humor and compassion. She died on a Saturday. It was cloudy and cold, and I left my 6-month-old daughter 1,000 miles away to be at her bedside. My beautiful daughter who has her curls and her mischief, and the same stubborn tenacity. My brilliant daughter who has no memory of a grandmother who would have set the moon in the sky for her. All because some arrogant doctor didn't believe a middle-aged woman and didn't want to bill the university's insurance plan for an x-ray because come on, she's probably just overreacting to some arthritis. After all, she was just a janitor. What could she possibly know? 5. I knew a lawyer who represented a young lady in her malpractice case, and won. She went skiing, crashed and broke her leg. The doctor set it and cast it, and sent her home. She kept complaining of extreme pain, but the drive told her, of course it hurts, it's a broken leg. Finally she called again and said it still hurts, and now it stinks. They brought her right in and found the leg had gotten gangrene. Bad, right? So they have to amputate the leg. During the amputation surgery that lasts many hours, the drive moved the good leg off the side of the table, which cut off the circulation, and for that many hours, killed the good leg. It too was amputated shortly after. She won a 7-figure settlement, but I can't believe it was nearly enough. 6. A friend was unable to pull her tampon out. She went to her doctor who also could not pull it out, but said that it would eventually come out on its own. I made an emergency appointment for her to see my doctor who discovered that lesions had formed holding the tampon in place. He managed to remove it. I wanted to go to her first doctor and say, have you never heard of toxic shock? She wouldn't let me, but I was angry that something as potentially lethal was ignored by a doctor. 7. I was administering an anesthetic to a patient for a hemi-knee replacement. The surgeon had less than desirable skills not only in surgery but in life in general. The patient was a Medicaid recipient. He did an extremely poor job repairing the knee, such that her knee bent out at a 30-degree angle. I came from an orthopedic background and was appalled by his actions. I finally spoke up when I realized that he was going to close and leave her knee like that. I told him that I would refuse to wake this patient up until he corrected his mistake. Everyone in the room was scared at this point. He said, "Just what do you think that would accomplish?" I told him that I would require the hospital director and the chief of surgery to come to the OR and witness his malpractice. He corrected his mistake. If he cared so little about Medicaid recipients, he should not take them as patients and should not accept the government, taxpayer, monies he received. The case law has shown that the anesthesia practitioner who renders the patient unconscious and therefore incapable of making informed correct choices must act as their advocate. What is the rudest thing someone said to you right after you had a baby? 1. My daughter was born with some reddish hair on her head, a lot of short strawberry blonde fuzz on her arms back. Her aunt, who happens to be from a family full of thick-haired women with facial hair, walked into the hospital room when my daughter was a few hours old. The crazy aunt exclaims, "Oh my God, do you want me to wax your baby?" ? My reply was, "Are you crazy? She's a baby." 2. I found love a little late in life. At 37 I married the most wonderful man I've ever known. I'm white and he is Spanish, born in Mexico. After a horrific car accident in 2003 I was told there was little to no chance I would ever become pregnant. In 2008 I was being admitted to the hospital for a procedure related to a suspected heart defect I had been, unknowingly, living with. I was routinely checked for pregnancy and surprise I found out that indeed I was in fact pregnant. Miracles do happen. My excitement was beyond words. After a worrisome pregnancy due to my age, heart and after effects of my accident, I delivered a beautiful baby boy. Our hearts were full. Fast forward a few months and I am at an outdoor baby shower for a friend. With the exception of the mommy-to-be, none of the guests had ever seen my new son. When I arrived he was asleep in his car seat, so I parked adjacent to the yard so I could sit close by and listen for his stirs. I was so excited to show him off. Everyone was seated around it chatting when I heard my son. The guest of honor was in the house attending to the food. I brought him from the car over to the group. I was beaming with pride and that's when my friend's mom gasped and said, loud enough for the whole group to hear, "OMG, look, it's a taco. He looks just like a taco." My jaw fell. I looked around the yard and there was silence with a lot of other jaws on the floor. I ignored her. I was so upset that someone would see anything but the most perfectly beautiful creature I was blessed with. I went into the house and made up some excuse to my friend why I had to suddenly leave. I was determined not to ruin her day. I drove home crying both in hurt and anger. I never told the friend what happened. I did however get a phone call that night from my friend's stepmom apologizing for my friend's mom's words. I never told the friend what had happened. Another instance was when I was in Kohl's pushing my son in the stroller and a woman stopped to say what a beautiful baby. She then proceeded to ask me if he was mine. I said yes. She said, "Really? All yours?" I said yes, all mine. 3. 2 days after I had my son I was pushing my son in his stroller at the grocery store. Mind you, I am a mixed-race woman who is black. My son's father is a mixed-race man who is white. I'm checking out and I notice this old white woman staring at my very fair son and glancing from him to me repeatedly. As I finish my transaction and go to leave she steps right out in front of me and says, "How did you get a baby so white?" I was instantly angry and responded, "I stole him from the hospital." And I walked away. I looked back to see the horror on her face and I smiled all the way home. 4. August, 1981. I had just delivered my sweet, beautiful daughter in the morning via C-section. That afternoon, my mother and father came to the hospital to see the baby. Mother walked in and said, "Now you can go home and put yourself on a diet to lose all that fat you put on." My father stood there and said nothing. My now ex-husband said nothing. I was so hurt. Her first thought was not to walk over to see her new grandbaby. It was to rip on me about my weight. She didn't hold her, she didn't even look at her. It was at that very moment that I swore to myself that I would never treat my little girl the way my mother did me. Ever. When it was time for me to leave the hospital, she was unfortunately the only person available to pick me and the baby up to take me home. When the nurse delivered us downstairs in the wheelchair, my mother said out loud in front of the nurse, "Here comes the cow." The poor woman who was helping me load the baby into the car avoided eye contact with me, and helped me get into the car as quickly as possible. I think just to get away from us. For those of you wondering if I was, in fact, big/fat/obese, I gained 40 pounds throughout my pregnancy. I weighed 140 the day I was discharged, and I'm 5 feet 4 inches. Certainly not model thin, but not obese. Mother has always been obsessed with appearances, and she wanted all 3 of her children to be beautiful. We were. She just didn't see it. Or maybe it just wasn't enough. Who really knows? 2 of us have struggled with self-esteem issues. I won't speak for my sibling on how he handled it. I will only speak for myself. After much soul-searching, I realized my mother's cruel remarks were a reflection of her own unhappiness. I've worked very hard to come to terms with my anger, and oftentimes dislike, of my mother. Her words cut deep over the years. But here's the thing, when I came home with 2 children and a pet cat in tow after a nasty divorce 10 years later, she was there for me. She and my father let me and my little family stay with them until I was able to get a job and get back on my own 2 feet. We have a good relationship now. She's my mother. She's the mother God gave me. Over the years, we have slowly come to accept and love each other. Does she still get on my nerves? Does she still speak out of turn and inappropriately? Yes to both. The difference is, I'm now a 60-year-old woman who tells her, "You're obviously not in a very good mood and you're being ugly. so I'm leaving. I'll call you tomorrow to see how you're doing. And I leave. I don't have to take on her negativity. And I have kept the promise I made in my hospital bed to myself and my baby girl. My daughter is my best friend. We talk every single day. We laugh at and with each other, literally, every single day. I thank God for having this child in my life. I have a son who is a precious gift from God. And how I love him. My daughter? God knew what he was doing when he sent me my daughter. She's 38 years old now, and a force all her own. And how I love her. Here's a pic of us, typically together 2 years ago, Lucy and Ethel as she calls us. 5. This took place before, not after, but it was so rude. 1994 I was working as a bank teller. 8. 5 months pregnant, standing on my feet all day, swollen, tired, etc. This lady comes to my window to cash a check. She asks me if I know what I'm having. I tell her no. I want to be surprised. She asks if I'm excited for the big day. I say yes. She asks if my husband is excited. I say I don't have a husband. Please know I could have just lied and said yes, but I like the truth, she said, in the nastiest voice possible. Oh, you're one of those. We were done cashing her check, so I just let her go. I didn't say anything back. I didn't try to explain my circumstances. Frankly, they were none of her business. She obviously didn't care if I was widowed, left, forced, a lesbian, chose to be alone, etc. Today I have an intelligent, hardworking, beautiful, funny, sweet, caring almost 27-year-old that I would not trade for anything. And I wish that lady could see what was created and carried to full term by this one of those. 6. I had a pretty hard labor, and after pushing for 2.5 hours my son was born in distress. He was whisked away to the NICU without me getting to hold him. My sister, wanting to distract me, told me, "Quick, feel how flat your tummy is. You can finally sleep on your belly again." The nurse, who had been snarky all through everything, was quick to point out, "You'll still look like you're 5 months pregnant when you stand up." I remember telling her to shut the hell up. P.S. When I finally got to see my son, his heart rate and blood pressure normalized within a minute of me holding him. He just turned 30 and he's given me 3 amazing grandkids. 7. You know what's really weird about pregnancy and having babies? The fact that people truly believe that your body is up for community evaluation. You really have been eating for 2. Goodness, are you sure you're eating enough? 2 more weeks to go? Are you sure you aren't about to explode? Exclamation mark. I suppose it shouldn't come as too much of a shock, considering a woman's body is often put under a microscope at any other time of her life. 2. I thought maybe things would settle down a bit once the baby actually left my body. Oh no, that's when the fun really begins. The rudest thing I remember someone saying came about 2 weeks after I had my youngest son. And it came from none other than a fellow woman. My daughter and I were walking into an elevator. I had my son in the car seat, and she was holding my hand. An elderly woman followed us in and smiled at my daughter. My little girl is social like her father, so she excitedly said, "Look at my baby brother. He's brand new." That's when the woman looked me up and down and narrowed her eyes on my pudgy belly and said, "Looks like mama may have another baby brother in there." I was so shocked that I didn't immediately respond. The elevator door opened, and I walked out. My daughter paused for a brief moment and said, "It's not very nice to talk about other people's bellies." And the elevator door closed. Rudest moment, but best mic drop from a 3-year-old in all history. Has your child's school done that got you so mad you went in and read the riot act to the teacher or principal? 1. My 9-year-old daughter came home from school and was walking around the house with her coat on. I told her to take it off. She said it would hurt. She told me the story that she had gone roller skating as a field trip with the school and had fallen down and hurt her arm. She told the teacher, who said she was okay and to just sit down. When they got back to the school, my daughter continued to complain about her arm. In the afternoon, the teacher forced her to square dance, allowing the kids to pull on her arm. She had asked numerous times to call me because she needed medical attention. Nothing. I looked at her hand and lightly tapped the ends of her fingers, and when I picked her off the ceiling, I gathered up her and my toddler and we headed to the doctor's office. The doctor could not do x-rays there, so they sent us to the orthopedic office. After x-rays, they found that the radius bone was fractured. The arm was set and then put into a cast. By this time, it was way past dark and we had to stop at the pharmacy to get a pain med for daughter. I called the school the next day and asked if the principal and the teacher were medical professionals. Of course, they told me no. I told the principal that I was angry that my daughter had broken her arm the morning before and that the teacher took it upon herself to play doctor and not allow my daughter to call home so that she could get medical attention. I demanded an apology for my daughter and wrote a letter to the school board. Both the teacher and the principal were reprimanded by the district. 2. My stepdaughter was in 6th grade. She brought home a basic math worksheet, marked with a 0. I was supposed to sign it and return it to the school. Since it was basic math, I took a closer look at it. She had all the answers right. I asked why she got a 0. She said it was from her calculator math workbook and the teacher gave her a 0 because she hadn't used a calculator. I called the school and requested a meeting with the teacher and the principal. I wanted to know 1. What is calculator math? 2. Why was she given a 0? Apparently, the school district had bought into some idea that as a life skill, kids needed to be taught how to use a calculator, so they bought a special workbook and calculators from an education company, and they were doing an hour a week, learning how to use a calculator. I told the principal and the teacher, that one of the important skills about calculators is when to use one and when to just do the math. Apparently, later in the workbook are problems that are hard enough that it makes sense to use a calculator. I told them that when they got to the section where doing the math in her head became difficult, my stepdaughter could use a calculator. Otherwise, she should use this extra hour a week to improve her math skills. Stepdaughter's paper was regraded as 100%. We never had to repeat the conversation, and she got an A in calculator math. 3. I'm fostering 2 little girls who came from a violent home life. When the oldest this year started kindergarten, she was coming home almost daily about a class bully taking things, tripping her, pulling her hair and slapping her butt and face. Teacher simply stated she's not the only one having problems with the boy and children lack social skills because of COVID. At that point, I involved the principal and vice principal. I told them, this child has lived 5 years with violence and she wasn't going to experience more under my watch. Told them she is both a child advocate and a lawyer and I would happily involve them if necessary. The principal said she would sit in on the class a few days. The second time she did, the little boy punched another child in the face. The child was removed and not returned to class. If he had been returned, yes, I would have involved the advocate and lawyer. 4. One day, I get a call from the principal telling me my son is being held after school and I needed to come in. They wouldn't tell me on the phone what it was about. I don't remember what grade he was in at the time, but it was elementary school. As soon as I walked into the office, I could tell he had been crying and, upon seeing me, he immediately silently mouthed, "I didn't do it." My son had never caused any trouble before. So, they tell me he had written something bad on the bathroom wall and now had to clean it up. His teacher was there, as well. So, my son, the teacher and I went into the bathroom. Written on the wall with chalk and neat handwriting was, "Go fuck yourselves." I knew immediately my son had not written it. His handwriting was horrible and this was written very neatly. Moreover, when he started to clean it, he could barely reach it, as he was quite short. He had to stand on his tiptoes to reach the top part of the writing. Even if his handwriting was good, there is no way he could have written so neatly in that position. I turned to the teacher and told her that there was no way my son wrote that. Surprisingly, she said, "I know and I think I know who did." "Then what the hell is going on here?" I asked. Another kid reported that he saw it on the wall after my son had used the bathroom. The teacher said she knows that kid's handwriting and knows it was he who actually wrote the statement on the wall. Seriously? The other kid, it turns out, was an excellent student, which my son was not. We went back into the office and I let them all have it. Their response was my son confessed. Sure he did, because they told him all he had to do was admit it and they would let him go home. This is the same tactic bad cops use to get a mentally challenged person to confess. I told them I had no intention of letting this go and my son and I walked out. I had my wife, who also happened to be a lawyer, write them a letter. They apologized and even admitted that his teacher had told them what she told me. I told my son to never, ever admit to something he didn't do and I explained to him how they took advantage of him. 5. Back in the 1980s my sons were in high school. During the showing of a film in class, my younger son had his feet on the unoccupied desk seat in front of him. Instead of telling him to put his feet down, the teacher grabbed the back of his seat and yanked it backward hard enough that the edge of the desk part slammed into his lower ribs, bruising them. After school, when he told us about this, we took him to the ER to make sure the injury was documented. The next day I went to the school about it. I had the hospital photos and report. I ended up in an office with the teacher, an assistant principal, and my son. The school acted like it was no big deal and my son was in the wrong. I said that was no reason to hit him with a desk. Things got heated. The teacher said, "I never laid a hand on him." I said, "Let's go out in the parking lot. I have a baseball bat in my car. I promise I won't lay a hand on you." I was getting loud, and I am a pretty big guy. The police were called by the school. When the officers arrived, both sides told their side. The officers looked at the ER reports and called for a higher ranking officer. The new officer showed up, looked at the medical report and photos, and asked me if I wanted to pursue it. I said I did. He then read the teacher his rights, cuffed him, and placed him under arrest for assault. He ended up losing his license. Lesson: don't hit a student with a desk, and if you do, apologize in front of the class, which was all I asked for. 6. My daughter broke her finger during gym and had to have surgery to pin it back together. A couple of days after returning to school she called me sobbing and said her gym teacher made her participate in volleyball and the ball had hit her finger. I drove to the school and walked in the door yelling, telling my daughter that I didn't care what her teacher told her, that what I said and what her doctor said took precedence over what some idiot gym teacher said. The principal was out of his office immediately, which was my sole reason for yelling, and he asked me if there was a problem. I replied that my daughter had been injured at school and had surgery to repair that injury and that her teacher had made her participate in an activity that had re-injured that same injury. I took my daughter to the car and as we were pulling out, the principal ran out to the car to tell me that her teacher had told her not to use her injured hand. I put the car in park briefly, looked at him, and said, "You go back in there and play volleyball without using your right hand, even if the ball is heading for your face." My daughter and I both received an apology. Her finger was bruised, but not rebroken. It set her PT back 2 weeks. 7. My daughter was in grade 5. She had fallen at school, and cut herself so badly, that other kids were traumatized by the amount of blood there was. I received several phone calls from other parents that night asking how she was. The school didn't call me, and they didn't clean out the cut. They taped a gauze bandage to her elbow, and sent her back to class. When she bled through that, they put another one on top of the existing bandage. By the time she got to daycare, she had 5 bandages just taped one on top of the other over a dirty cut. Thankfully, The daycare had enough common sense to call me at work. They weren't comfortable removing the mountain of bandages, and quite frankly, I don't blame them. They didn't know what they were dealing with. I went and picked her up, and rushed her to the doctor. She ended up having to have stitches, antibiotics, and pain medications. They also had to spend about half an hour cleaning out the wound because there was so much dirt and debris in it. I called the school the next day and lost IT on the principal. Schools here are supposed to be able to administer basic first aid, and call the parents in case of injury. Thankfully, that was that principal's last year at the school. The next principal saved my daughter's life. He recognized an early allergic reaction to a stinging insect, and called us immediately. Are some of your cool husband-wife moments. 1. During my initial days of pregnancy, like every woman, I too face vomiting issues throughout the day. I will mostly be drained out irrespective of whatever food I have at night. I will vomit, fell asleep. My weight started reducing drastically. So my hubby used to keep alarm at midnight, 1 a.m., 2 a.m., to bring glass of milk for me. I won't even have strength to drink. But he forcefully feed it in my mouth. Cause it was the only time where food stays in my stomach. At second, third trimesters, I found lot of discomfort to sleep because of tummy size. Also my baby is very much active whenever I am in bed. So to make me sleep, he used to tell me bedtime stories. Though it's a known story, I wanted to hear from him daily as I love his narrating skill. Exclamation mark on hearing. Me, my baby inside will sleep peacefully within short time. Though it's crazy, I found it very lovely now. He took care of me well, more than my mom. I never felt the absence of my mom whenever I was with him. 2. Our house in India is pretty big and has a very large courtyard. In front and in back too. My husband gets up late, he is on holidays, and walks in his boxer. He is a shameless fellow. I tell him to brush his teeth in the back courtyard. Opposite to our home, there is a family, where a young girl, maybe in her early 20s, came a few days ago. Maybe she is guest there. My dear husband told me once, Smita, this girl looks at me in that way. I was wrathful, told him, as you are getting older, your piece of brain is also going away along with your hair. Then he was kind of disappointed and told me, you check out from tomorrow. I forgot. Next day, before reaching to the wash basin, he called me and told you see. As soon as I arrived, that girl rushed back. I was like, okay, why? This is a coincidence in our dirty mind, or maybe she is just making fun of him because of his stupid outfit. But the wife inside me was a bit curious now. Next day morning, as soon as he got up, our eyes met and we both burst into laughter. Again he went to brush his teeth, and after a few seconds she arrived, and then as I came in front she stood firm, this time literally staring at him. Now, this was kind of awkward and irritating for me. I strictly told him, they are our neighbors and whoever that girl is, I don't want this 9 mataka, I game. Now, tomorrow onwards you will use the other wash basin. He laughed and laughed. I eventually forgot this, and after a few days we kept washing machine in this courtyard and were washing lots of clothes. The dear husband was helping me. That girl reappeared, and again she is staring directly at him, quite shamelessly. In fact, my mother-in-law was also there for a few minutes. Of course Mill didn't notice her. Now, this made me angry. I was turning red. My husband smiled and told, my hair only falling and the brain is still intact it seems. Meanwhile, that girl is again looking at us. No, at him actually, continuously. My husband pulled me closer, looked left and then right and kissed me. Lol. In 13 years of my marriage he never did anything like this, and we are not that kind of couple who walks hand in hand or display a lot of affection publicly. I was shocked and happily embarrassed. I came inside. We have a cool husband-wife relationship. We share such things with each other and solve the matters in most unexpected ways. Needless to mention, that girl stopped standing there. I'm not sure what was the reason for that stare, but yes, this gave me a reason once more to say we share a cool relationship. 3. I stood near the door of the huge wedding hall when I saw heads turn in one direction. A woman walked in with a huge smile on the face. Her husband and a kid followed her. She hugged the bride and congratulated the groom. 2 of my husband's friends came near me and whispered, that's R. You know K's. They said winking. That's her? I asked stunned. Yes. Should I call K? They asked. Yes, please. They giggled amongst themselves. They called my husband and stated I was asking for him. That's the girl you had a major crush on? I asked as he came and stood next to me. Oh yes. R. Damn. She is pretty. Long curly hair, chiseled features, and what a lovely smile. I said, ah yes, gorgeous right? Husband's friends giggled again behind us. I can see what you saw in her. I remarked. I know right? She is still beautiful. Absolutely. And she is so slim. She hasn't even put on weight after the baby. Haha yes. She still looks the same after so many years. Nice. Good choice. I said. Hey, by the way, did you get the what? His friends come in between us. That's it? Aren't you going to feel bad or jealous? They asked me, catching me off guard. Husband laughed. He is married to me, not her. Why should I be jealous? I asked smiling. One of them punched my husband and the other playfully touched his feet. Matcha, where and how did you find her? They asked, referring to me. Secret, he said and grinned at them. I looked at him puzzled, because online wouldn't sound good. 4. Wife woke up last night to use the restroom. When she came back I asked if she needs anything as she was not keeping well from last few days. Me said, lovingly, do you need anything? She said, rudely, a little space to sleep will be kind enough. Exclamation mark. Me said, facepalm moment. I realized I managed to capture the whole bed by sleeping diagonally in just a matter of few minutes when she left for washroom. 5. During our initial days of marriage, myself and my man used to stay alone in Chennai. My in-laws stayed at Coimbatore. After our daughter was born, my mother-in-law came with us to take care of our daughter. During the times when we were alone, my man, almost every day, used to ask for an omelet. I'd take 2 eggs, add onion, chili and other stuff and prepare the omelet mixture ready. While pouring the mixture in pan, I always fail to pour exactly half of it. The result will always be 1 big omelet and 1 smaller one. My man one day noticed this, and he took the smaller one. I was pregnant at that time. On the other hand, I snatched the smaller one from him and gave him the bigger one. It kind of became a petty fight every day. One day I wantonly took the bigger one in my plate. He thought I took the smaller one and swapped the plates as usual. Mission success! Exclamation mark. Somehow he knew that, and so he usually takes both the omelets in both hands and weighs them approximately and transfers me the one which seems to be larger in weight. How sweet of him. In due course of time I mastered in preparing 2 omelets of equal size and mass, yet I chose to prepare them of unequal size so that my man gets a bigger one. Even now when my mother-in-law starts preparing for omelet, I will snatch the pan from her to prepare my special omelet. Her mind voice, even after these many years she don't know how to prepare 2 equal-sized omelets. My man always wins this omelet war. Means I always get the bigger one in spite of what evil plans I make. So omelet moment is one of our cool husband-wife moments. 6. We were planning on for a baby from 3 years but we never got positive result. When we consulted an infertility expert, they said it is case of unexplained infertility and to try for EOI. We tried EOI and it failed. I was inconsolable. I cried like there is nothing left in our lives. My husband was consoling me, and the conversation goes like this. He said, "See, don't cry so much. There is nothing lost in life. We are not even 30. Don't lose hope." Me said, "I am waiting to see positive result from 1 year and I am broken every time." He said, "What if we don't have a baby? You are my queen and always remain my queen. I will take care of you so well that I will carry you wherever you go." Me said, irritated, "Am I a dead body to carry? You think I don't have legs? Don't try to butter me. I won't yield for your words. You don't understand my pain." He said on hearing, "Am I a dead body?" Bursted out laughing and repeated my lines again. The very next moment, in between the pain too, I started laughing my heart out. I forgot all the pain I had. I cherish this moment every time. He told that to console me, but I took the other way round. And I never repent for my misunderstanding because it made my day. 7. Okay, so this happened this weekend itself. We are newly married and have shifted to a new place. And since moving in we have been decorating the house to make it our home. We recently brought few plants to be kept in the balcony. It is his duty to water the plants as I leave really very early for office. This Saturday, after having lunch together, I went to clean up the plates. Once I was done, he came to me with a glass of water and kept on pestering me to drink. I drank and thanked him and asked him how did he figure out that I was thirsty. He simply smirked and said, "Mujhe hai mir sare podho ko pani pilana hota hain." Translation: I have to water all my little plants. So yup, I am one of his little plants. There are several other incidents where the love of my life is extremely cute or cool. I am insomniac. It is extremely difficult for me to fall asleep, but he has noticed that talking to me in calm and soothing voice helps me sleep. So whenever I have trouble sleeping he would talk to me, tell me funny incidents, talk about the days when we dated, and enact me the story of Harry Potter in a funny manner, as I'm a huge Potterhead. So yeah, that's our story. Seemingly small thing has made you lose interest in someone. 1. A girl asked me if Paris was a city in New Jersey. I laughed. It was cute. But then later she didn't know if the Gulf of Mexico was on the east or west of Florida. She also lives in Florida. Not so cute anymore. I looked out the window. A wall of black clouds was rolling towards the building. Lightning danced across the sky. Crows suddenly lined the electric lines outside. They looked in at us, cawing. I heard a bell toll in the distance. This isn't going to work. 2. I met a fantastic man recently. Our connection was so deep and it had been a long time since I met someone I wanted to be exclusive with. I am a genuinely happy woman. I don't need a man or be in a relationship to feel complete. That being said, he and I spent a lot of time together at the beginning. He was a very successful businessman, owns 2 homes, cars, etc. I'm a pretty low maintenance woman. Money doesn't impress me. About a week into things he randomly asked me about my credit score. I have never had anyone ask me that kind of personal info before. My ex-husband and I discussed our financial info only after our engagement. Really threw me off. I stayed with him at one of his homes for about a week. We went to the market 2x and ordered food in a few times. I offered and paid for the delivery meals. Cost about $120. He paid for the groceries, $180. But I did all the cooking. I even pre-made him a few meals to have on hand for when I left. A few days ago we were talking on the phone and out of the blue he brought up our shopping trips and how much money he spent on groceries and how he never spends that much money on groceries. That really threw me off guard and made me feel uncomfortable. I reminded him that normally he orders food in since he doesn't cook, and I'm sure the cost of food delivery weekly was pretty close to what was spent on the groceries. Anyway, just the fact that he felt compelled to say anything never mind remember the total cost of the groceries really didn't sit well with me. I've never dated a man who didn't enjoy taking care of me. It's sad because I really liked him, but all I can think right now is if he is this way about money this early on in the relationship, it would only get worse over time, and I know eventually it would be a huge stressor in my life and ultimately ruin things. If he was financially challenged I could understand his concerns about money, but this man lives well and enjoys his toys, cars, 2 motorcycles, top of the line accessories for riding, etc. His business is booming and he has money in the bank. I am a self-supporting single woman. I rent a room in my friend's condo and I drive an older model car. I don't have much but I don't need much. He has no idea that spending $120 on the meals we ordered and put a bit of a dent in my budget, and I wouldn't dream of ever telling him it did. So in a nutshell, his attitude about money has made me lose interest in him. I'm not a good digger by any means, but if he's this petty about groceries, I can't even imagine the other things he's that way about. 3. He had a handicap parking sticker on his ostentatious car. I didn't know you were handicapped. I'm not. I have a friend in City Hall. I can park almost anywhere now. In many ways he was a nice, interesting guy, but I couldn't get past it. He could walk without pain. His brain was in good shape, but he didn't want to be slightly inconvenienced for the sake of people with real obstacles. You've heard of gaydar? My schmuckdar detector was off the charts. 4. Onion soup. I dated this guy a few times, and he suggested taking me to one of his favorite restaurants. As we were seated, he remarked that the chef made a fantastic onion soup. Me said I don't really like onion soup. Him said, oh, but you've never had really good onion soup. Me said it's just not something I enjoy. By this time the waiter has brought water and the bread basket, and is waiting to take our order. Him said 2 onion soups to start with. Me said just 1 onion soup. Thanks. Him said 2 onion soups. Waiter. The waiter is now glancing nervously between us, torn between the man who's going to determine his tip and the woman who just might make a fuss in his fine restaurant and cost him tips from other tables. I relent. Me said all right, 2 onion soups. The waiter serves the onion soup, hot, fragrant, with a thick layer of cheese. I dip my spoon into it and take a taste. Him said, now, isn't that the best onion soup you've ever tasted? Me said it's really good onion soup, and I'd probably be enjoying the hell out of it right now, except I don't like onion soup. Him said, sulkily, well, you could have said something. Obviously, this guy was oblivious to what I said repeatedly. A small thing indicating a massive problem. Last date. 5. On a date ordering food. Me said I want pizza. Him said, do you want a salad with that? Me said no, I'll just have pizza, thanks. Him said, you're sure? Me said yes. Him said, okay, I'm going to order a salad. Me said, for just you, right? Him said yes. Me said, okay, good. Waitress takes our orders. Then moments later salad arrives first. Him said, do you want some salad? Me said no, I just want pizza. Said after looking disgusted by what's on the salad and then gave a confused face at asking about salad again. Him said, try some salad. Me said no thanks, I just want pizza. Him said try. Me said reluctantly and frustratingly lifts fork, tries some salad, then instantly disgusted and spits salad out into a napkin while date went to bathroom. My pizza finally arrives. Him, while I was enjoying my pizza, want some salad? Me said no, I just want pizza. In firmer tone and now so angry on the inside. Date over. Me to myself, never again. How many times must a girl say no? He's controlling. Red flag. Get out now. Before going home I promptly refused a second date invitation from him and almost ran home to shower smoke smell off from the pool place where we had our date. Rules of thumb. No means no, and let's consider all situations a girl might say no to a guy, not just the sexual kind. If he doesn't listen to you on the first date, he won't listen to you in the relationship. It will only get worse. First food, then clothing, then other personal preferences, then bam, you've lost yourself and who you are. No, thanks. Be nice on the date but take notes and do not subject yourself to it again. Controlling behavior is not good in any form. 6. This person and I had been seeing each other for a few months. I noticed that I had a tail light out, and he accompanied me to the store to buy a replacement. In the store parking lot, I popped the trunk and replaced the blown bulb. He took the bulb and smashed it on the ground. I looked at him in disbelief and asked him why he did that. He said that way, it wouldn't be mistaken for a good bulb. I pointed out that this was a public parking lot, and people with children very frequently went there. I said that parents often allowed little children to go barefoot, and that a parent might put a barefoot child to stand on their feet on the ground when getting them out of the car, and with broken glass on the ground, a child could get their feet cut up badly. He said that would be the parent's fault for not looking at the ground before putting the child down. As the mother of 5 children, none of whom he ever met, this set me off. We had a very angry discussion. He defended his position adamantly. I tore it down at every turn. He had multiple other faults, but that one decided it for me. To have so little respect for others, especially as a professed religious person, it was the end. I was so done with him. 7. This one is a bit silly. A few months ago, I went on a date with a girl I had met online. We had dinner together. She was pretty and charming. She had a smile that felt really genuine and warm. We had some shared interests, particularly in literature and some more obscure bands. She relied a bit too much on talking in platitudes and overly generalized statements on more complex topics, but I wasn't too turned off by that at the time. Maybe it was because she was pretty. I admit there was a bias happening there, but I noticed throughout the entire night, she never said thank you to or made eye contact once with anyone working in the restaurant. When she was done ordering, she placed the menu on the table rather than put it in the server's outstretched hand. Whenever someone came by to fill up our water, nothing. When a waitress pointed her to the direction of the washroom, not a peep. And she never made eye contact once while asking her question. Suddenly, I found myself becoming annoyed with her brand of #ready maxims. For all of her positivity, she couldn't see fit to express an iota of that to the hardworking wait staff. I drove her back to her place first, and then I went back home. That was the last time we met up. I will happily admit that, yes, it is a bit silly to lose interest in someone over something as seemingly small as that. And yeah, I know there have been a couple of times in my life where I was in a rush and was rude, or perhaps even brusque to someone who was just trying to help me. But, this was bordering on aggressively willful negligence. Another time, after I came back to China, I went on a date with a girl who was very polite and thankful to wait staff. But she spent the entire evening on her phone and didn't once try to even act interested when it wasn't her turn to talk. You can guess how that burgeoning relationship turned out in the end. Maybe it's just me. There's a weird house rule that you have to explain to your house guests. 1. This doesn't seem weird to me at all, but it's a headache with just about everyone who comes over. The dog is my dog. I make the rules for him. I tell him what to do, not the house guest. If I tell my dog he needs to go lay down, he needs to go lay down. There is no, oh, it's okay. He can keep bothering me. If you just don't want to be in the same room as him, maybe you have allergies or just you're uncomfortable around a big dog, do not take it upon yourself to out him outside. Just tell me, and I will do it. Doggy is not allowed to play rough and jump on guests. Please don't say oh, it's okay and encourage him when I'm telling him to mind his manners. Worst peeve of all, please ignore him entirely while you're eating. If you do, he will lay down and ignore you too. But, if you talk to him and engage with him, he'll beg. Absolutely do not give him scraps from your plate while you're eating. I'm okay with him having a small bite of most things, but my method is, it gets dropped in his dish when you are all done eating. As far as I'm concerned, he can only eat things that are in his dish. None of this seems weird or difficult to me, but he's a cute dog with a lot of personality, and he suckers people all the time. He's still quite young, not yet perfectly trained, so I find it very important to stick to his rules quite strictly. But it's hard to refuse this face. The man is my husband. He can bother my husband all he wants, but I don't like for him to squeeze in on guests. 2. I will tell you about a rule a neighbor had that had to be explained to guests. My son, when he was 10 years old, was having a sleepover at this neighbor's house. I dropped him off and the mother called me about 30 minutes later asking me to pick him up. What I didn't know is that she had a young, 2-year-old son with multiple health problems. She heard my son cough just once. He didn't even have a cold, but for some reason he did cough. They couldn't take any chances because she told me that what could just be a cough for most people could turn out to be major for her young son. He could end up in the hospital or even die from catching a cold from another person. I felt horrible for the little boy and also for the sacrifice her other children and entire family made for this little boy. There was no cure for what he had. They took him to Israel for a hopeful treatment there, but it didn't help. That was years ago and I often wonder about this little boy. I knew at the time his outlook and prognosis were not good. But it is certainly understandable why this precious family had to make a house rule that most of us wouldn't even think twice about. 3. Living in NYC, there are always people who want to stay over because of hotel rates here, which is fine as long as they understand that I am not running a hotel. Examples: cupboard space is rare in NY apartments. If I give you water in a mug, please just accept it. I probably have very few water glasses and they are all in the sink. Same for towels. I don't use face towels. I don't have any. Please don't explain to me why you need one after I handed you a clean bath towel. If you need a face towel every night, you should have brought your own. I work. Please just accept toast and an egg in the morning. No, I cannot cook a hot breakfast for you every day of your stay. Yes, I realize I am Asian, but I don't always have rice ready to eat as you so desire. And if I say I don't have it to any other Asian ingredient, please don't explain to me what the ingredient is. And if this line of requests gets any more annoying, I will not cook the usual hot breakfast on weekend mornings that I usually offer to guests. Coffee: if you require 100% fresh coffee, I can provide directions to the nearest Starbucks. Or you can make your own. Your other option is to accept the coffee I made half an hour ago. My internet connection is not the greatest. Again, I will provide directions to the nearest Starbucks, but please don't complain every single day as a middle-aged adult. I clean the whole apartment before any guest arrives. If you take it upon yourself to clean parts of the house you deem unacceptable, that's on you. However, please do not point out to me you cleaned the bathroom every single day you visit. Again, I work. If you choose to arrive earlier than 6, I cannot drop my job to meet you somewhere. Either you can come to my office and I will give you my house keys and directions to the apartment, or you can entertain yourself for the day until it is 6. And never say my job isn't that important and therefore I should just meet you to take you to the apartment. Do not walk around my apartment half naked. I can't even believe this has to be said. I can understand if you're going the 10 steps from the bathroom to the bedroom, although even then don't people have robes anymore? But do not walk around my living room without a shirt on. 4. My husband and I have an African gray parrot, and the rules are for his benefit more than ours. Take off your hat before you come inside. This shouldn't need to be a rule, but people don't care. Our parrot is scared of hats. It's a parrot thing. They can get scared of random items. Don't bring avocado into the house. No whole fruit. Not on a sandwich. Not on a pizza. Avo can be deadly to parrots and they can die from the avo on your hands if it's enough. Don't try to touch/feed the parrot. Don't spray deodorant in the lounge. If this is the first time our parrot has met you, come through the front door so he can see you instead of the sliding door next to his cage so he doesn't get a fright by seeing a stranger so close to his cage. Keep the bathroom door closed at all times. 5. Not me, but a friend. Many years ago, before children, my wife and I were to stay with my mom's childhood friend's family for a couple of days. When we arrived, we got out of the car and left all of our luggage in the car except that my wife took her purse with her. We knocked, were admitted, shown around, introduced to their 2 German shepherds, a mother and grown pup. Both were very well behaved and friendly. Just one thing our host said: "You cannot take anything out of the house without letting me know first so I can put the dogs away." The mom is very protective and will become aggressive if you do. It's nothing we trained her to do, and nothing we've tried has changed that. When it was time to settle into our room, my wife picked up her purse and, without thinking, we turned towards the door, took one step, and bam! Mama dog was literally in my wife's face, paws on her shoulders, growling and baring teeth an inch from her nose. I said, "Put the bag down and step back slowly." That done, Mama was back to her pleasant tail wagging self and let us get our stuff when we left the purse behind. Phew, how's that for a weird house rule? 6. Please don't cook anything in my kitchen, or insist on helping me cook in my kitchen. There are two reasons for this. The first is that when I'm cooking I'm very quick and super efficient and know exactly where everything is, so I will dance around opening cupboards and drawers and knocking them closed with my hips. Anyone else in the kitchen invariably gets in my way and blocks the drawers or cupboards I need to access, and constantly asks, "Where do you keep this? Or do you have that? Or how do you want me to chop/slice the onions?" Vastly increasing the time it takes to get dinner prepared and causing a risk of accidents with boiling water and sharp knives. I've had dinner both spoiled or delayed extensively by people trying to help. The second reason is that I have a lot of very expensive cookware, china and cutlery, and house guests may not be aware of any special care they require, or may be oblivious to the fact that a single pan or knife might be worth over $100 because they are used to using cheap Walmart stuff. An all-clad pan requires a very different cooking temperature than your standard Teflon frying pan, and I don't want to be spending 3 hours after dinner attempting to salvage it from the welded-on black mess that you've invariably burned onto it. I've gritted my teeth and clenched my toes while over $150 worth of knives and bread pans were completely destroyed because someone absolutely insisted on cooking us their signature meatloaf as a way of saying thank you for having them and wouldn't take no for an answer. So nowadays, when we have house guests we just try and eat out as much as possible, and my husband knows to keep guests distracted and occupied if I'm cooking for them at home. So if you happen to be a house guest, please respect your host/hostess if they don't want your help in the kitchen and just enjoy being spoiled instead. 7. It's actually not my house, but my sister's. The problem is so bad when guests are there, that she has literally installed signage as a reminder. She has a custom-built house that is in a somewhat remote area. It doesn't look like a farm but is in farmland. She has a flair for modern decorations and accommodation. Looks like a high-rise NYC apt in the middle of a rural area. While her decor is modern, her house uses a large septic tank that has had to be cleared a few times because of visitors thinking they can flush anything down the toilet, including sanitary supplies. She has very decorative signs posted in each bathroom and concealed trash cans/liners asking all visitors not to flush anything except the TP they have posted in the toilets. Sanitary supplies, Kleenex, etc. must be thrown in trash receptacles marked specifically for those items. The cost and mess of clearing a septic tank is something they try to avoid, so they remind all visitors, friends and family alike not to clog their septic tank. An uncomfortable but necessary conversation. How has a parent dressed their child that made you say, "You've got to be kidding me"? 1. When my daughter was in kindergarten, we were meeting some other parents and her classmate friends at a park for the afternoon. One of the girls showed up in a t-shirt with a large picture of 2 cherries on it. With the caption "Pop my cherry." I was really shocked by that. Who even makes clothes like that for little kids? But the mother was Russian, and although she spoke English quite well, it's not her native language. She was not aware of the implied meaning of that phrase. My other friend and I gently told her what it meant and she was genuinely mortified, and turned the shirt inside out. So really it was a misunderstanding. 2. Thanks for the A2A. As a preschool teacher, I've seen it all. Snow boots in August? Check. Tank top in January? Check. 1 croc, 1 sandal, swim trunks, and a backwards t-shirt? Check. 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 If there's one thing I've learned in my time teaching 3-year-olds, it's that you have to pick your battles, which is why I rarely judge what my students show up in. On more than one occasion, I've had a stressed out mom burst into tears at drop-off when I ask how they are. If sending their kid to preschool with their t-shirt backwards helps them get through the morning, I'm not going to judge. Sometimes I'll fix it, or sometimes I'll just leave it if the kid is adamant that's how he wants it. Except for the tank top in the dead of winter. No judgment, but I couldn't let her go all day freezing. She was happy to wear Miss Stephanie's sweatshirt all day. The only time I judge is when it's the opposite. I had one mom who would send her daughter in every day in a fancy, frilly dress from a boutique, her curls gelled with a massive bow on top, and clean, shiny Mary Janes. Every single day. It was adorable, and she always looked like she'd stepped out of the pages of a Carter's catalog. When she first came in, at the end of the day, no matter how hard I tried, something would be messed up. She might have scuffed her shoes, got dirt on her dress at recess, or taken her bow out in the middle of the day, and her mom would be furious. She'd rant and rave and complain that I couldn't keep her daughter's outfit picture perfect, no matter how many times I tried to explain how I'd tried. I'd gently try to suggest she send her in play clothes and it always fell on deaf ears. It got to the point the preschool director had to get involved, and when she backed me up, the mom simply pulled her daughter out. I hope whatever preschool she ended up at had better luck than me, or went somewhere without dirt, dust, paint, markers, glue, water, food, other kids. So far, that's the only time I've ever thought, "You've got to be kidding me," when I saw how a child was dressed. 3. We had a summer fun birthday party for my daughter, explained in the invite that there would be water balloons, paint wars, a watermelon eating contest, tacos for lunch and swimming in our nice crystal clear heated pool. Yes, I did put that on the invite, and various other bits of messy summer fun and to please dress in clothes that could get ruined, my word exactly, or to let me know ahead of time with their RSVP that they would need clothes provided and the sizes they would need for short/t-shirt, and to please send a swimsuit. I also made sure the parents knew I was a certified lifeguard, at the time, and certified in CPR/first aid, and I let them know they were more than welcome to stay if they were uncomfortable with their kids swimming without them present. Lunch would be provided for parents as well. I had one mom bring her kids, twin boy/girl, in a nice suit complete with tie and vest, and her daughter dressed as if she were the flower girl for some posh wedding because that's how kids should dress for a party. I didn't have spares for them because she hadn't even bothered to RSVP at all. In fact, had made it quite clear in conversation that they wouldn't be coming. She just dropped them off and left, which was fine. One of the other moms happened to have some spare clothes to fit the kids so they could have fun. When mom came back, she was absolutely livid. At no point in time did she bother to tell me that the kids were actually going to a formal wedding after the party. They were wet, painted and beyond tired after spending 4 hours at my house having fun while she went to get gussied up for the wedding. 4. A 12-year-old, slightly overweight, and known for coming out with unrelated comments at times, was teased and bullied by his grade 7 classmates. His mom sent him to school in dress pants, slightly too small, at least 2 inches too short. Dress Oxfords, worn a bit, but always unpolished. He wore a belt, and suspenders over a slightly small white dress shirt. The entire staff was aware of his difficulty, and did their best to protect him. His mom was invited in for consultation, and his clothing, his comments, and the unkind treatment of his classmates discussed thoroughly. There was a dad, but we didn't meet him. Nothing happened, so we tried to get him into a private school, but his grades were not high enough to warrant a scholarship with them, and they would not accept him. His mom would not consider a publicly funded religious school. We started letting him out 5 minutes early. Mom was to pick him up and drive him home, instead of him taking the school bus. Mom forgot more times than she remembered. After another conference, she agreed to buy him jeans. A start, we thought. He came in jeans, rolled up several inches, the same dress shoes, a belt and suspenders, over a white dress shirt. 5. It was a warm day in the beginning of summer. My daughter had run around barefoot all day. I was talking her with me to a memorial service we were having for one of my clients. She quickly took a shower, got dressed and was ready to go. I told her to grab her shoes. She told me she had a pair of shoes in the car. We left. In the car, she put her shoes on. I couldn't see her, but all seemed well. I got to the funeral home. She jumped out of the car. She was wearing white knee-high go-go boots from Halloween. She was maybe 7 years old. Everyone was looking at her and trying to figure out whose child she was because she was sitting with my boss and my other clients. After the service, I apologized profusely to my boss's boss, who was in attendance. She laughed it off, but I learned to always check out the shoes. 6. I saw a small girl, 7 or 8, wearing an off-the-shoulder dress in a restaurant. She was cold and it looked a line strange on a person with no bust, therefore no cleavage. That's how low cut it was. Shortly after daughter, 8-year-old granddaughter and I went shopping for her little girl Christmas dress. Guess what I found? Totally inappropriate dresses for small children. Off-the-shoulder dresses, backless with spaghetti straps dresses. It's cold in New England at Christmas. Plus no 8-year-old needs to be dressing like a grown woman going to a formal event. I made a dress for her. She wanted green satin with lace, a big bow in the back and long sleeves. Like magic it appeared from my sewing room. Her mother was grateful. She was very happy. End of story. 7. My sister-in-law, husband's sister, is pretty high maintenance. Perfect hair, perfect clothes, perfect makeup, you know the type. Name brand everything. Lucky for her, she found the Ken to her Barbie. Her husband is just as much of a perfectionist. He has to have perfect hair and perfect clothes. He's neurotic about keeping things clean and orderly. I always said that if we ever had kids, theirs would be standing to the side in name brand clothes while mine and my husband's would be having a riot playing in mud puddles in play clothes. My son was born first and we always dressed him in practical, functional clothes. The 3-pack of onesies for $10 at Walmart? Yes, please. Babies grew fast and we opted for functional and cost-effective clothes. He'd outgrow them in a month or so and we didn't feel the need to pay a lot of money for clothes he'd just outgrow. My nephew was born 7 months later. From the get-go, it was expensive everything. Everything had to be name brand and could only be in one of 4 colors: white, gray, navy, or black. My husband once looked on the website where my sister-in-law got all of her son's clothes. $20 for 1 pair of baby socks. $80 for a pair of baby jeans. It was insanity, spending so much on a baby. They quickly learned how much of their money they were burning with my nephew kept having diaper blowouts. Bill would scrub and scrub to try to save the expensive onesie, but it was often a lost cause without dry cleaner intervention. When home, they kept him in just a diaper until another blowout soiled their couch. At that point, they kept him in the cheap clothes from Carter's, but when they were out, this kid was dressed to the nines. At meal times, they stripped him down to a diaper to save his clothes. But they didn't quite learn their lesson. When the little guy started daycare at a year old, they sent him in designer outfit with a backup. On a few occasions, my nephew burned through his outfit and the backup and ended up coming home in some other kid's clothes. Once again, my Bill and sister-in-law had to dress him in cheap clothes. And then they complain that having a kid is so expensive and they can't understand how we can afford to have a second child when we make so much less than they do. Go figure. Is the most badass thing your parent has ever done. 1. Built a home when there was none. He was a gold medalist in his university. He wanted to study further but was abandoned by his parents. He married my mother and started off as a medical representative with a salary of 700 rupees. They worked hard, really hard. They'd buy a kilo of upma for 12 rupees instead of buying a dosa, she said, because it would last longer. They saved for 15 years, had issues with dad's family for eternity, bought a good house, sent us to decent schools and bought a car. Tears dropped down my eyes when my mother showed me the yearly expense and income report of my father over the years. Recently, he took a transfer to Chennai from Hyderabad because there was a good salary increase, about 30,000 rupees. He stayed there for 2 years away from his family working his heart off. He came back to Hyderabad, promoted, thinking the good times would start, but died in a road accident in a few months and left my mother, a scarred widow. She supported my father when he was nothing and together they built a home. She lost her father when I was 8. She lost her husband when I was 14. She broke her neck, head, hand and multiple ribs in the accident in which my father died. Still, she wakes up at 5 a.m. and prepared chapatis with one hand for me when I was preparing for exams. I'm 23 and I missed my father's love and presence only a few times for past 9 years. 2. When my dad humiliated a racist neighbor. For context, my dad is African American in my family and I live in a majority white neighborhood. We moved to this neighborhood about 10 years ago but were only able to afford a small, old house due to the ridiculously high cost of living. Although my dad is an architect and works in an office, he also uses those skills to do landscaping/yard work on our house in his free time in order to improve the appearance of the property. So one day, probably about 9 years ago, he was doing some yard work and was wearing his normal, very casual work clothes, a sleeveless shirt and shorts. As he was working, he noticed that one of our neighbors, whom we didn't know yet because we had just recently moved to the area, was intently watching his work as she was walking by the house. Suddenly, without any apparent reason, she blurted out in an obnoxious tone, "Can I speak to the owner of the house, please?" Obviously, my dad was shocked, not simply because of how strange of a request this was, but also because the person had incorrectly assumed that, because he was a casually dressed black man in a white neighborhood, he somehow wasn't the owner of the house, when in fact he was. So, what did he do? He went into the house briefly, counted to 10, walked back outside, and said to the neighbor, "Hi, how may I help you?" The look on that woman's face was priceless. 3. My dad was putting gas in the car. I was standing on the opposite side of it. I went to throw trash away at the trash can across from me. Out of nowhere, a car came barreling off the road and into the gas station faster than any car should ever drive in that tight of a space. I froze. I felt the car fly past me within what may have been a foot or 2 feet from me, but it felt like inches. That's when I see an otherwise placid dad turn from human to enraged silverback gorilla. He picked up a rock and threw it as hard as he could and started running after them. Suddenly, the car was engulfed by multiple police cars that apparently were chasing it. When we got back in the car, I asked him why he threw a rock at their car. He said I wanted them to come back and fight me. They almost hit my kid driving like an idiot. I was not going to let them get away with it. You could hear the indignation in his voice and see the fire in his eyes. Someone messed with his little boy, and he was ready to go to war to protect him. That little boy was me. I never felt so safe and secure as I did in that moment with him. My father's act of impulsive, selfless love for his child was the most badass thing my parent has ever done. 4. When I was in 5th grade I saw my father do something completely badass. It was a typical night for our family sitting around watching television on a weeknight. Bam bam bam! Exclamation mark! The door of our house was getting pounded on, scaring all of us out of our seats. My father jumps up and opens the door. On the front stoop is our neighbor holding their infant child, naked upside down and blue. The baby boy was choking on a piece of candy he had somehow grabbed. They had tried to turn him over and shake him trying to dislodge the candy. It didn't work. They ran to our house. My dad calmly grabbed the child and performed the Heimlich maneuver. The candy spat right out and the color of the child came back. I just stood there in awe. The mother just cried and couldn't stop, thanking my father. My dad worked for the post office, but volunteered for the fire department as an EMT. He also volunteered for the police and was a baseball and softball umpire. Just like most boys, we didn't always get along, but I always respected the badass things he did in his life. 5. This happened when my dad was just out of high school. One of his longtime friends confirmed the details. My dad and some friends were at a roller skating rink having fun and flirting with some girls. There was a black family skating there as well. Suddenly they hear this guy saying, UN%#S, we don't want your kind here. He kept harassing them and it pissed my dad off. He went up to the jerk and told him to knock it off, that this family was more than welcome to be here, and he is the one who should leave. The bully asked, UN%#lover, are you going to make me? My dad told me he was terrified because this guy looked like someone who had been in a lot of fights. But the looks on that poor family's faces was more than he could bear. So, he agreed to take it outside. While he was putting on his shoes, an employee told him he should take off, that the guy he was facing was a known troublemaker and he had just gotten out of jail for assault. That didn't help my dad's nerves. Then as he was getting up, the father of the black family told him not to bother, that they will just leave. I don't know how he mustered the courage to walk out that door, but he went to face him anyway. A crowd gathered around them as they faced each other. The bully said, Now I'm going to teach you a lesson %love. He never had a chance to finish that sentence. My dad hit him squarely on his chin and the racist bully crumpled to the pavement. One punch and he was out. Everyone cheered. The girls were all swooning over my dad, and the family thanked him for being the only one standing up for them. Yep, my dad was a true badass that day. 6. It was 1989, and miniskirts were all the rage. I was sent home by a security guard at my school for wearing a short skirt. Mind you, it reached my fingertip test. Even though it technically wasn't too short, she said I should not be wearing that. So I went home, and coincidentally, my dad was in the kitchen. He happened to take the day off to deal with some other matters. And he asked, "Why are you home?" "Hi Dad, I was sent home to change out of my skirt because it's too short." My dad said, "You will do no such thing." And he grabbed his keys and took me to my school and yelled not only at the security guard but the vice principal and some cheerleaders whose skirts were way shorter than mine. The security guard and VP both were telling my dad that, "The boys will get distracted." My dad, this is not Saudi Arabia. I did not move to the US to have my daughter be told what to wear. And those boys need better parents. I left the Middle East to give my daughters a life of freedom, safety, and opportunity. Not this. I honestly have never seen him so angry at someone in my life. He was a gentle soul, a cool dad, and quite funny. They let me back to class, and I never heard another word muttered by any of the staff ever again. And I kept wearing miniskirts to throw it in their faces lol. 7. My mother was a very tiny woman at 5 and 85 pounds soaking wet. While driving cross-country late at night in 1967 we were run off the road by a group of crazy-looking hippies in 3 different cars. We were in the middle of nowhere with no one else in sight. They surrounded our car and kept yelling for us to get out. It was just my mom and us kids. My mom got out of the car holding a .22 pistol in the folds of her skirt. She politely told the hippies they should leave in a strong loud voice. They laughed and one threw a bottle at her. She didn't even flinch. Then she said, very nicely, "All right then. Who would like to die first?" They thought that was hilarious. Then without missing a beat she spun around and shot a guy who was sneaking up to the car. She shot his ear right off. The spun back and shot the leader's hat off his head. They all took off running for their cars. My mom jumped back in our car and took off like a bat out of hell. She shot out a tire on each of their cars and we sped away. We were all sitting there with our chins on the floor. Then my little sister, who was just learning to count, said, "You only got 1 bullet left." We all started laughing. Mom too, but then she started crying and cried all the way to our grandparents' house. I never forgot how strong she was or what a good shot she was. When people talk about bravery and heroes I always think of my mom. You ever given a customer something for free? 1. 30 years ago, I owned some furniture stores. It was just before Christmas and a young woman came into the store I was at that night to pick up a roll-top desk that she had purchased on layaway. She made weekly payments towards this purchase and was proud and excited that she was able to buy this desk for her husband's Christmas present. It seemed apparent that it was a real financial stretch for her to have afforded this. She had come to the store with a pickup truck, and we helped load the desk into the truck bed. With a Merry Christmas and smiles all around, she left for home. Half an hour later, the woman came back to the store in tears. She had struck a pothole in the highway and the desk was launched out of the truck and smashed to the ground. Fortunately no one was behind her, and a passerby helped get the desk back into the truck. Sobbing, she pleaded whether we could do anything to fix the desk. Clearly, though, it was irreparable. She was so distraught. There was clearly only one thing to do. We loaded another desk into her truck and I told her that it was my Christmas gift to her. She was so excited and thankful, and I think it really was a gift to myself. I felt really good about that. 2. I was working at Chick-fil-A one day when an employee of another restaurant came in. She sat down then talked on the phone and I could overhear her. She was upset for a few reasons, and I heard that she had worked a 9-hour shift and hadn't eaten anything all day. She was a mess. She got up and joined the line, and I made sure that I carefully took her order. When she came by, she was incredibly pleasant, asking me if I'd had a good day. Her humility and manners, despite having a bad day, were impressive, so I took the liberty of paying for her order. She was delighted, and almost started to cry, and she asked for a hug. She left in a much better mood than before. I never saw her again, but I'm glad that I could give her a positive experience when she was having such a trying day. 3. Yes, all the time. Whenever someone writes to us or calls us to book a house cleaning due to a traumatic loss, we always give them a free service. It's just a humane thing to do. We don't tell our staff that the service is free, so they get treated absolutely no different from any regular customer, with care and respect. Just last week we cleaned a house after a home invasion. The woman was severely traumatized and I was afraid that in this case having a clean house will not make a difference. But it turned out that having a sparkling pristine bathroom and taking a long bubble bath did. She was happy. Also, last week we cleaned a home of a young widow and mother of 2 young kids. I don't know what happened to her husband. I'm afraid to ask, and it's none of our business, but she wrote that she was overwhelmed. When one is faced with an insurmountable loss, to have anyone show an ounce of humanity, really helps. I write about this kind of stuff all the time not because I want to brag. I do it to give other people ideas to do the same. Good ideas are contagious. 4. When I lived in Toronto, I was a server at an all-day breakfast/family-style restaurant where I worked the night shift. I noticed my manager talking to a homeless man at the cash area up front. I wasn't busy, so I went over to see what was going on. My manager was telling the man he had to go, and the man kept insisting he had money and pulled out a $5. This was going back and forth for a bit when I asked my manager if I could have a word with him. I asked him why he was refusing to serve the man. Turns out it wasn't his lack of money, it was his appearance and odor. He was afraid it would offend other customers. I looked around the near empty restaurant. It was a weekday. I could see manager was feeling bad. My solution was to seat the man in a section by himself so nobody would complain. He agreed to this and I offered to serve him. I went over and asked him how he was doing and what would he like. He ordered a bowl of soup and a coffee. I brought him what he ordered and added a couple of dinner rolls and butter. I let him know to take his time and that we weren't busy so he didn't have to worry about us needing the table. When he was almost done his soup, I went back to the kitchen to grab him another bowl and more dinner rolls. When I put it down on his table, he told me he didn't have enough for the second bowl. I told him the kitchen would be getting rid of the soup soon anyway, and he looked like he really enjoyed it. He thanked me and I left him to it. When he was done, he waved for me to come over. I asked him how everything was and he said it was the best soup he ever had. I asked him if he wanted anything else and he said just the bill. I didn't want to take what little he had, so I told him the customers who had just left took care of it for him. He then tried to give me the $5 as a tip. Such a kind soul. I told him to please keep it so he could buy himself something next time he was hungry. He thanked me again and left. I went to the manager with the bill and paid for the coffee and 2 bowls of soup. 5. I was working as a store manager of a luxury clothing brand in Kerala sometimes back. Our store was the first premium brand to open in Thrissur, which is a tier 2 city. I was the first manager of that store. My brand was a well-known brand in Kerala and I used to receive the who's who of Kerala as my customers. Film actors, politicians, bureaucrats, etc. My brand was a status symbol in Kerala and people loved flaunting the logo. The store looked awesome compared to the other stores in that area and passerby used to stare at the display and visual merchandising. One day I was sitting at the cash desk, making sales plan for the month. A lady walked in, looking very uneasy. She was wearing a very simple dress and had no accessories or ornaments. The kind of customer I normally receive are flashy. She sheepishly asked my sales associate about shirts. I noticed her immediately and went up to her. I knew she wouldn't be able to afford the merchandise as the starting price range was 2,800 Indian rupees or roughly $50, which is a huge amount for a poor person in India. She told me that she is a maid who works at the nearby guest house and she used to pass my store every day. She was always eager to see what we sell inside but couldn't muster enough courage to step in and leave without buying anything. Today was her husband's birthday and she would love to gift him a shirt from our store. She was clutching a 1,000 rupee note. She asked me to show something in the 1,000 rupee range. Let me just add on the fact that, in that same town, shirts at local shops start from 150 rupees. Buying a shirt worth 1,000 was in itself a big step for a person of her financial standing. Maids are generally paid 6,000 Indian rupees for a month's service. My heart skipped a beat when I heard her budget. We had nothing of that price range. I had realized by now that how much effort she had put in to save the money and buy a shirt from our store to surprise her husband. If I would have told her the reality, she would have felt really sad and maybe even embarrassed. I asked her to go ahead and select a shirt. I asked my sales associate to take her to the entry price point section and thankfully she liked a piece from that section. She happily took the shirt but was taken aback when she saw the price tag of 2,800/. Sensing her discomfort, I stepped in and informed her that the shirt is just for 1,000 rupees as it was on anniversary sale. That brightened her up. I billed the shirt in my name and just took the 1,000 rupee note from her and the rest was debited to my account. We gift wrapped the same and handed it over to her. The look of joy on her face had made my day. She left the store feeling very lucky and happy. So practically it wasn't free, it was just a discount. 6. I worked at Dollar General stores back in the 80s. About once a month there was a woman that would come in and ask to use the bathroom every time. She lived in the neighboring town, about 9 miles away, and would usually hitch a ride to the town I was in. Her purpose was to come to the pharmacy and get her prescriptions picked up for the month. After she would get them, she would leave the pharmacy and come to the dollar store. She would ask to use the bathroom and then once in it she would get out her medicine and take who knows how much of it, but she would be so messed up sometimes. This one time in particular I remember. When she came into the store she was filthy dirty. Her legs and feet were black from dirt and as she had no shoes her feet were bleeding because she had had to walk the 9 miles to the store that day. She was crying as she asked to use the bathroom. I told her to go ahead. When she went into the bathroom I went to the shoe department and got a pair of sneakers I thought would fit her and a pair of socks and went to take them to her in the bathroom. I made her wash her feet and legs off first and then gave her the socks and shoes to put on. She hesitated and told me she didn't have the money to pay for them. I told her not to worry about it, that I would pay for them because I couldn't stand the thought of her walking back down the highway all those miles to get back home with her feet bleeding like they had been. She cried some more and thanked me for caring enough to help her. I'll never forget how it made me feel to see this woman that was so determined to get her drugs that she walked 9 miles down the highway to get them and thought nothing of her feet bleeding like they were. I spent about $15 on the shoes and socks. Not much to me, but it was more than she would have spent on them herself probably if she did have the money. I just couldn't let her go out the door with her feet bleeding knowing that she had to walk another 9 miles home. What was the last thing you said to someone before they died? 1. It's okay, camper. Mama and Dada get sick too. You are being very brave. Now get some sleep. I love you. My 2-year and 9-month-old son, whose name was Camper, had the best day of his life on Saturday. 2 birthday parties, one at the beach and one at his cousin's house with great friends and family. The following day, he woke up with a headache. He was very smart and well-spoken and told us, my wife and I, that his head hurt in the morning. We assumed he was probably a little dehydrated and just not feeling the well from all the cake and party action on the previous day. My wife had to see clients that day, so I spent the day with Camper. We watched the movie A Bug's Life, but he was throwing up and napping throughout the day. I just thought he had a general sickness. My brother-in-law was a pediatrician at the time, so he advised us to make sure Camper stayed hydrated with some Pedialyte. We did that, then put him down for bed that night, which is when I said, "It's okay, Camper, Mama and Dada get sick too. You are being very brave. Now get some sleep. Sweet dreams. I love you." And to be honest, I don't really know if I said I love you. I regularly tell my children that, but for the life of me, I cannot exactly remember. It feels better to think that I did, even though he knew that anyway. I told him a few times throughout the day that he was being brave, because he didn't cry or complain at all. He never woke up from that final sleep. We ended up taking him, unresponsive, to the trauma room that night. He had an undiagnosed brain tumor that I guess just slowly grew as he got older. Slow enough that his brain could adjust and we never once saw any symptoms. And finally, on that day, it ruptured an artery in his brain and that was the end of his very bright, very full, very short life. 2. I will never forget the last thing I said to my daughter before she died. I was tired after working, so I decided to lay down to watch the evening news. My daughter had just finished eating the dinner I cooked. She had epilepsy and was experiencing frequent grand mal seizures, but every time I would call the paramedics, they would tell me just don't let her hurt herself. Anyway, I told her to go lay in my bed and watch Friends, which was one of her favorite shows. She called out to me, "Mommy, Alice Cooper is on Friends." I told her I was too tired to get up. When I got up to see what she was watching a few minutes later, I found her dead. To this day, I will always regret not going in there when she told me that. My brother told me it was probably better that I wasn't there when she had her final seizure. The doctor swore to me she wouldn't die from her seizures. I asked the coroner what caused her to die, and he told me heart failure due to the extreme nature and frequency of her seizures. My last words to her will be something I will never forget, nor will the last words she spoke to me be either. To think of her all the time. I have not been able to bring myself to get rid of most of her things. They are all I have left of her. I even have clippings of her hair. She was my only child. She was my Roxanne. 3. My incredible wife was just days away from dying of brain cancer as she lay in her hospice bed with her eyes closed. She had been largely non-responsive the previous 9 days, not answering questions posed to her, and when she was awake, just staring into space. It was late, around 10:00 p.m., and it was just she and I in her room. I asked her, "May I kiss you?" And she responded with a whisper that I was not expecting. I had missed what she said. I repeated the question, this time with my ear close to her lips. Her response? Of course. I gently kissed her lips and she kissed me back. While it wasn't the last thing I said to her before she passed away 4 days later, it was the last thing she said to me, or anyone else. It was a gift that I shall never forget. 4. In high school I was friends with a girl who was very toxic, and when I began digging myself out of depression I cut her out of my life and didn't speak to her for a year. We had a very close relationship while we were friends, but for an entire year we never spoke a word to each other, not even a hello when we passed each other in the hallways at school. Then, one day, she texted me, inviting me to one of her parties she held every year. I didn't want to go, considering I knew nobody who was going and we weren't friends anymore, but I wanted to get away from my parents for a night, so I forced myself to go. The party, unexpectedly, was very exciting and adventurous, and somehow I ended up being one of the last to leave the party. She and I were in the pool together striking up a conversation for the first time in a year. While conversing I realized that she changed in a year's time and was now a much happier person. "It's late, I better get going," I had told her while stepping out of the pool. "Oh really? Okay. Well, thanks for coming." She smiled, throwing me a beer and I, surprisingly, caught it. "Of course, thanks for inviting me. Honestly, I didn't think you would. Jane, I know our friendship ended badly, but you'll always be one of the best friends I've ever had. Hey, can I tell you something?" She had nodded and I continued, "I'm really proud of how far you've come, and if you ever need anything I'll always be here for you." 2 days later she was texting and driving on a bridge, hit a car at a fast speed, and her car fell off the bridge with her still inside of it. She didn't survive the crash. It was very painful attending her funeral, but I am very lucky my last words to her weren't "I don't want to be friends anymore," and instead more kind, heartfelt, and honest. 5. Last year my beloved husband Bob died. It came out of the blue with no warning. My sweetheart had been out in the yard working for a couple of hours and it was a hot humid Tennessee day. As he sat in a rocking chair in our living room under a fan, I brought him water. He drank a couple of large glasses while we talked about what we were going to do that evening. We had decided to snuggle on the couch and watch a movie. It was about 7 p.m. I knew he had to be tired as he had sweat through his clothing and was dirty from the weed eating. The 2 puppies we had began to dance around us wanting their evening walk, and I suggested that he ignore them and rest a bit. I knew that they could wait, but he said, "No, I have plenty of steam, I'll be back in a bit." I said, "Okay," and bent down to kiss his cheek, and he said, I'm dirty as a pig," and I told him, "Yeah, but you're my little pig," and kissed him anyway. He gave me that look husbands give their wives and I smiled, and he said, "You keep that thought going, I'll be right back," and I just smiled and winked at him. He walked the dogs around the corner and I never saw him conscious again. My beloved was gone in an instant. He was 59. The drive said later that he had developed an unusual heart rhythm that could not sustain life. He had no blockages or plaques. Some things in life make no sense. All we can do is go on and be and do the best we can with God's help. Somehow I am greatly consoled by the fact that my hubby always knew how much I loved him and that even after 39 years of marriage we were still attracted to each other and preferred time together over anything else. I was, and am, a very blessed woman. 6. My buddy Jesse said fuck you. And I replied go to hell, asshole. He then said oh I will, and if I go first, I'll keep a spot warm for you. Then I left his house, hungover, on the way to work. It was all in good fun, of course, but the next thing I had heard, he died. I think about that all the time, and especially now that it's getting near my birthday on the 1st and the anniversary of his death on the 7th. He was the last person I drank with, and since we drank to black, did your mom do that became the stuff of legend. 1. One night when I was 15, my mom and I heard our drunken neighbors discussing very loudly, being plastered. They thought they were using a conspiratorial whisper across our side fence how they were going to poison one of our dogs because she wouldn't stop barking at them. Being all of 15 years old at the time, I was ready to go next door and confront them. All 5 of them. Me receiving a severe beating would have been the best case scenario. If I had. My mom had her own idea of how to take care of the situation. What my mom did next, I wouldn't have ever guessed possible. She got my dad's 12-gauge shotgun, racked a shell, punched out the screen of her bedroom window and then leaned out just far enough for them to see her. All she said was you mess with my dog, and it's over. The neighbors decided discretion truly was the better part of valor, and retreated into their garage. The neighbors taught me several new phrases of Hispanic profanity that night. The next few hours were rather tense. From her window perch, she kept them cloistered in their garage until my dad got home from work. As my dad parked, they took off at a full sprint to their car, all the while yelling at her things that I'll not relate. Luckily for all parties involved, the neighbors decided rather abruptly that they'd prefer to live somewhere else. Our dogs lived long, peaceful lives until they passed from natural causes. 2. When I was a boy, I had real problems with certain foods. I couldn't have butter on anything or drink milk straight. Milk on cereal or chocolate milk was fine. Over when I left with a bunch of kids at a get-together, lunch was served and included butter on everything, and everyone was expected to drink their milk. This had happened before and I knew to stay quiet, not really eat anything, not make a big deal, get something later, etc. One of the supervising women noticed, however, and felt the need to make an example of me and insisted that I eat everything upright in front of everyone. I told them that if they forced me to eat it I would get sick and it would be their fault. Boy, did that lady get pissed when I said that. You know what happened next? She forced me to eat that food and I got sick all over the table with all the food on it and, boy, did the stuff hit the fan. My mom arrived just as the lady opened up on me. Mom looked puzzled as I had handled situations like this before with no problems. Mom announced who she was, told the lady, not unkindly, to quit yelling at me, and asked, what is the problem? The lady threw me under the bus and said how outrageous it was for a child to dictate what he or she would eat and look what I had done. My mom paused a minute and said very slowly, I can't believe my son wouldn't have told you he would get sick if he ate these things and he should have, and I am sorry. And then all the kids started shouting, he did tell them, he did. I did have some loyal friends. My mom looked up and said, what, he told you, and you still made him eat it? Exclamation mark. The lady says, well, it's not up to him to tell us. Mom's face got red. You are an idiot and should never be left around children. If you or anyone ever ignores something my child says, there will be hell to pay. Do you understand me? Exclamation mark. This is all your fault, and yet you blame a child. How despicable. Mom tore into her for a few more minutes, and then looked down at me, and I will never forget, she looked right into my eyes and said, it wasn't your fault, Spencer. They should have listened. It was their fault. They can clean it up. We're leaving. She grabbed my hand, and we held our heads high as we walked gracefully to the car. I know that I was not all in the right on this one. It's hard for me to judge, but Ta's an example of a mom sticking up for her child. That day shone brightly. That kind of thing stays with you forever. 3. I was brought home from a date that hadn't gone well. I leapt from the car splitting the front spit of my skirt very high. I was holding my skirt together running up the driveway and Mum came out. She walked to meet me asking are you alright? I said I was and she pushed me behind her and faced the fellow following me. She then grabbed him by the lapels and stopped him in his tracks. You, she said. Don't. She then shoved him back where he fell. She then advanced on him like a lioness picking him up almost off his feet and shoving him again. Stay away from my daughter. Don't call her, don't talk to her, don't make any contact ever. This from a woman who is frightened of everything. My mother would walk through fire for me and I for her. 4. My mother was the black sheep of the family. When she was 16, she lied about her age and married a New York mobster. My grandfather dragged her home, had the marriage annulled, and sent my mother to a convent to become a nun. That didn't exactly work out. My mother got into an argument with a nun. My mother grabbed her by the throat, slammed her against a wall, and began choking her. That got my mother expelled. My mother didn't go home. She did meet Amelia Earhart's mechanic. John taught my mother to fly. My mother used to ride on the back of his motorcycle. That didn't go over well with the family. After a problem with her family, she had to go back to Brooklyn. In Brooklyn, my mother met a man who was a member of one of the 5 families. Danny, among other things, He was an enforcer for a loan shark. My mother broke off their engagement after Danny threw someone off a roof as an example of what happens when you don't pay the loan. Then my mother met my father, who was a naval officer. Nothing much outrageous happened after that. My aunts and uncle always talked about how different my mother was. 5. Many years ago, girls' sports wasn't a thing. It may seem absurd now, but long ago, girls were cheerleaders, or parade princesses, and that was it. Also, moms of young boys playing Little League baseball were often dragooned into volunteering time working the snack bar. Usually, they would not be able to see their sons playing, because they are too busy selling soda and popcorn and the like. Then my mom came along. She volunteered to run the snack bar, when no one else wanted to. She kept one eye on the game, and made sure that whenever son X was up at bat, his mom would be working the grill, which offered a view of the field. Any mom volunteering would be deliberately scheduled to the grill when her son was at bat, so she could actually watch her son play ball. She also lobbied and volunteered to start and manage the girls' soccer league, when no one else wanted to. As it turns out, there were dozens and dozens of girls wanting to play soccer. All they needed was, pardon the pun, a league of their own. One of the girls had a dad who was a vice president of Pepsi. He donated a 6-flavor syrup and seltzer soda machine to the snack bar. The snack bar went from selling cans of soda to selling cups of soda. The cost of goods sold plummeted and the price remained the same. Profits went through the roof. So much money was made that the league could afford to install lights in the main field, expanding game times to the evening, so all the dads of the nuclear families of the 70s and 80s could attend their sons' games after work. This, among other things, is part of my mom's legacy. 6. If you met my mother once, you were in love with her forever. When she died, we rented the largest church sanctuary in the area for her funeral. So many people attended that there were people lining the walls and standing outside with outdoor speakers so they could hear. There wasn't a dry eye on the property. Even the funeral home director was sobbing. He had been a lifelong friend. She left a legacy that none can match. I could never be a fraction of the woman she was. She was kind, dedicated, determined, friendly, and just plain good. My stepfather was a long-haul trucker. Once, he was several states away and due home the next evening. He called my mother to tell her that he was going to be late. The vehicle of a family that was traveling had broken down and he was going to help them get it fixed. The next day, he called and said he was still helping them and would be home the next night. The next night, he called and said he was on his way home, and would my mother mind if he brought the family home with him as they'd never been in my home state. Of course, the angel said absolutely. We lived out in the country and the front of our house was all glass. We had a rather large farm. The next night, I walked into the living room to find my mother standing at the glass door, looking out. My father's semi-tractor trailer rig pulled in and parked, and behind it, pulled in 2 touring buses. 2 of them. 27 people got off of those buses. My mother's reaction? Lil, pull some more meat out of the deep freeze. We have company. She was unflappable. The family was a gospel singing group in their band. They stayed with us for 2 weeks. We became very good friends and enjoyed years of fellowship. Just because my mother was an angel sent from heaven and was a blessing to all. Has your child ever done anything that has left you completely shocked? 1. I had the flu a few years ago. My sons were 2 and 3, my daughter 5. I woke up in the morning and it was 10 a.m. I was horrified. I had slept in with my kids up and only me there. I rushed out of bed and fell before I reached my bedroom door because I was so sick. I looked up to see my daughter and neighbor. My daughter had woken up first, my husband already at work. She changed both the boys' diapers, which she'd never done before except on her stuffed animals. Got cereal for herself and the boys. Got everybody dressed and marched the boys next door to the neighbor's house to see if they could watch the boys so she could take care of me. My neighbor, terrified that I was super sick, came and checked on me and ended up calling into work and staying the day so I could sleep and get well. 2. I was watching a movie Wonder with my son. That's a movie about a little boy with facial difference which made him wear his space helmet so others won't bully him at school. My son, 3 years old, asked Mom, "Why does this boy wear this helmet?" Me said, "Well, because he is a little different than usual." I tried to explain without much digging into details. "But Mom, he is just the same as all of us," my son replied. I was left speechless. His tiny little soul really sees no difference on this boy's face. For my son, he is just the same as him, and I just wish it stays that way forever. 3. My 8-year-old son shocked not only me, but everyone that was in the hospital room when his younger brother was born. It was one of those moments you wish you had a video recording it would have gone viral. It was in 2017 when my wife gave birth to his younger brother. My wife started labor around evening on a Friday, so we had to ask one of our friends to take my son as the hospitals do not allow children to witness the ordeal of labor. Besides, he was sleeping when we left the house. Lol, he was 5 then. My wife eventually gave birth in the night and I asked my friend to bring him to see his younger brother. The next day, my son came while one of the nurses was in the room for the regular round, so she took the baby and placed him on the cot some few meters away from my wife. My son went quietly to the cot to look at his brother while everyone else was engrossed in a conversation. The nurse suddenly stopped our conversation quietly and pointed to my 5 years old beside the baby and, like a man proposing to his lover, "We heard, I am so happy you are here. Ever since you have been in my mummy's tummy, I have waited for you. I am going to take good care of you. I will protect you. I promise. Etc. He suddenly sensed that everyone was quiet and he stopped and shyly walked away from the cot. It was so brief but emotional that no one remembered to record the scenario. As everyone, including the nurse, was stunned to hear that from him. 4. Well, not my child. But, My younger brother. I'm 16 years old and my brother is 7. So all of you teens, who are the elder sibling, understand the responsibility you have on your shoulders. So one day my parents had gone to the doctor, and me and my brother were left at home. That particular day, I had horrible cramps. Due to periods, I was completely drained of energy, and was feeling super nauseous. Now, my parents wouldn't leave me home alone when I'm in this bad condition, but the doctor my mom was going to, was a specialist, and very hard to catch. So, my parents had taken the appointment 3 months back. They went because I convinced them I was fine and that it wouldn't be that bad, so they could go and that's that. Now, usually, when me and my brother are left home alone, he becomes really bratty, and this day, I thought would be no different. But, this particular bratty kid, who threw a million tantrums for everything, mind you, dragged me to my bedroom and made me lie down. He pulled the covers on me, quite haphazardly, and sat beside me as good as gold. He constantly stroked my forehead, brought me warm water, and gave me his most prized chocolate. But we shared it, of course, because he thought it would make me happy. That day I saw a side of my brother which made me 100% sure he'd taken just after me. JK. Later that night, he came into my room to wish me good night, and I was already half asleep. He just came, stroked my forehead one last time, and whispered take care. Man, was I proud when I shared this story with every one of my friends. Siblings seriously are the best blessing in disguise. Stay stupid. 5. Yep, my son is 2, and before this, he was never really the affectionate type, which is very different from his father and me. We are super cuddle bugs. He would very rarely hug us, but he would allow us to give him a kiss, and other things like that. He is also very shy and will not do any of that to anyone apart from his father and me, even his grandparents. We were being supportive, but trying to get him to loosen up and at least act like a kiss was not that difficult. Anyway, after dealing with this for the past 2 years, we had pretty much decided he was just going to be a standoff person. He has a great-grandfather who is the exact same way and we thought he must have gotten it from him. Well, one night I was putting him down for bed. I reached over and gently touched him on the nose and said I love you. He looked up at me with his big blue eyes, reached up, and gently touched me on the nose. He didn't say anything, but I could see in his eyes that he understood what it meant. Then, the most amazing thing happened. He put one hand on each of my cheeks and held my face while he just kind of looked at me for a minute. I couldn't believe it. I started crying right then and there. My little boy, who struggles to show affection to even his own mother, was telling me in his own little way that he loved me too. Since then, the I love you nose boop has become our thing. He now willingly gives a kiss to his dad and me before bed and he is working on giving hugs. But my absolute favorite thing is when he puts his hands on my cheeks and just stops for a minute. Even if that is all he is able to do to say I love you, it is enough for me. 6. Yes, not in a bad way though. When my oldest daughter was 4, her father, myself, and a couple of friends started a motorcycle ministry. We weren't sure where we wanted to fit into our community with regards to services for those in need, but we knew there were gaps. Our first year we decided to start with a coat ministry. No matter who, or how many, or how old, if you needed a coat, we would give or get you one. We really underestimated the need, by a very great measure. Anyway, for most of a couple of weeks, our front yard and the street in front of the house was filled with people needing coats. We were having trouble keeping up. We had called all our friends, every church we could, local thrift and clothing stores, and up until one certain evening, we were running neck and neck with the need. A family came to us with several children and we had coats for all of them except one little girl my daughter's size. We searched and called all to no avail. The child had next to nothing to keep her even a little warm and a vicious cold front was bearing down on us. My not quite 5-year-old daughter came to me and said, "Mommy, she needs a size 6X, or whatever it was, like mine." I told her I was looking for one. She informed me that she had 2 coats and the little girl could have one of hers. I thought that was so sweet and told her so. I went and got the girl and her mom who were about to leave. I told them as luck would have it my daughter had 2 and she was welcome to one of them. My darling took the girl by the hand to her room and a short while later, the little girl emerged, coated and beaming. We walked them to the door wishing them well, etc. As they drove away I noticed my daughter trying so hard not to cry. I asked her what was wrong and she could barely keep from wailing, "Mommy, that was my favorite coat." I asked her why didn't she give the girl her other one. What she said next just about knocked me flat. It was so wise and generous. She explained that she had given the girl a choice of the 2, because she said, when you're poor, everyone tells you what you can have instead of asking what you want. She said she wanted the little girl to feel happy and not poor in her coat when she went to school. I was stunned and humbled at the same time. 7. When my now 36-year-old son was around 2.5 years old, he came into my bedroom and told me that he had made me breakfast because I was tired. Of course I got up right away and walked into the living room. There right in the middle of the floor was a big mixing bowl with flour dumped into it and the rest of the bag on the floor. A carton of eggs with 3 or 4 in the bowl with the shells included. The milk was mostly in the bowl too. He had decided to make me pancakes. I couldn't be mad at all. It was the cutest, sweetest thing that he has done. To be honest, he had almost all the ingredients, just needed to measure them out properly. Is the best way to get revenge on someone who broke your heart. 1. I dated a girl in college whom I thought I might marry. She felt the same though we never planned it. Then one evening my world exploded. After having a few too many drinks with a friend, he confessed he'd had an affair with her while I was gone to boot camp. "Are you #king kidding me?" I screamed. "Sorry, just wanted you to know. He called as he ran out the door ducking for cover. I flipped out and started throwing bottles. I understood for the first time how a person wigs out and beats up someone else. Instead, thankfully, I just took off, roamed for a few days, gave myself time to calm down and get rational. Marriage never exactly entered our conversation again. We'd still see each other occasionally but never anything serious. I simply never trusted her. Interestingly, she and my friend never saw each other again. My senior year, I met a beautiful young woman who was just as beautiful on the inside. I hadn't trusted anyone with love since that night. Too many wounds. But this young woman was different. I somehow knew. And for 45 years she has proven it over and over. My wife and I happened to see the other woman years ago. She'd never married. Perhaps revenge was her seeing what might have been. Though honestly, I didn't care anymore. And I'm thankful every day I found the one I married. The best revenge for a broken heart is to love again and forget about revenge. 2. If boyfriend and I break up one day, if he decides he doesn't love me anymore, if he betrays me or lies to me or leaves me, I know exactly what I would wish upon him. I'd want every single tangle present in his life to smooth out so he can travel through it uninterrupted and free. I'd want him to find a woman who would cook with him rather than need time to write. She would love riding on the back of his motorcycle instead of deeming it not worth the risk. Her hair would be wild, because he likes mine, and her disposition patient and kind. She'd curl up into his arms at night and lay there still instead of squirmy. She would be a sound sleeper and not notice his snoring. She'd drink scotch and order meat bone-in. I would fervently wish for boyfriend's happiness without me. I would maybe like to know that in the mornings, when he poured her coffee, he'd briefly think of the time he had with me. We can't go through the world wishing others ill just because they didn't love us, because things didn't work out with us, because they didn't fit our demands, because they hurt us. We can't do this because it is neither right nor realistic, but also because it constricts and diminishes us, narrowing our own trajectory and potential. You cannot wish ill upon others and expect everything to go well for you. 3. 4 years back, on the evening of my birthday, my boyfriend of 3 years confessed that he was married for last 8 years. I thought he was kidding, but he was not being funny. God knows why he chose my birthday to break my heart. I remember crying for almost an hour outside CCD, where we went to celebrate my birthday. He said he loved me, and that he never wanted to lose me and blah blah blah. I wanted to kill him. I wanted to kill myself or both of them. After crying for hours, I asked him to leave. He denied. It was late night and it was not safe for me. I composed myself, smiled and wished him luck. I never looked back. After a few months he messaged that my smile still troubles him. Could I smile? Didn't I love him? Weren't I sad? I was broken. But that's my revenge. We worked in same office for another year and I made sure he sees me happy always. That's my revenge. I invited him for my own wedding. That's my revenge. I told him how much I love my husband. I really do. That's my revenge. Talking about revenge, living well is the best revenge. 4. I was shattered and scattered when she left me. I cried for days. All I used to do was think about her and only her. I used to search her profile on Facebook and look at her photos with her husband. I used to feel sad seeing her happy with someone else. Few months passed. I met our mutual friend. He was very mature. I started asking about her. I showed him her profile on Facebook and talked about her. He said, "Stop wasting your time in searching her on Facebook. Do something great so that one day she searches you on Google." What is the best way to get revenge on someone who broke your heart? Get so much successful that the person who broke your heart regrets about leaving you, at least once in their entire lifetime. 5. My boyfriend once very rudely said to me that my sister has better breasts than I have. It definitely broke me. I was being quantified. My love was being quantified. My emotions were played. He broke up with me and despite he being rude I went to him to be with me. Guess what? He made love with me, or rather I should say he fucked me and complimented saying his present GF. Oh yes, he has a girlfriend and he still slept with me, is way better in bed than I. I was emotionally broken. Started reading books, made friends, started smiling again. I never looked back at him, begged him or messaged him, neither blocked him anywhere nor abused him. But with every special moment in life that takes place I tell him, inform him, thank him. I don't know what is he doing now, but heard he has started bad-mouthing me. Revenge done. I'm happy now. He is not. I'm smiling now. He is not. I'm free. He is not. I'm not guilty. He is. I'm not vulnerable. He is. A piece of advice to all of you: life doesn't stop, nor should you. Move on and be happy. Exclamation mark. Trust me. You can thank me later. 6. My ex-boyfriend cheated on me with someone, so obviously we broke up. Since we were in different cities, I used to get his updates from mutual friends. One fine day he called me and started narrating that how his current girlfriend dominates him and I was the best he could ever get. Frankly, I did become a little weak, but since he was telling about his then girlfriend, so I didn't have an opportunity to go back. Call me stupid, but I was so madly in love with him that I was ready to be back even after knowing that he cheated. His calls continued, but every time he was telling about his then girlfriends and the problems with them only. As a human being with a heart, I listened and always gave him a crying shoulder. Yes, I go out of my way to help people and I don't think that makes me spineless. Fast forward few years, I got married to the man and he made me realize what love actually is. The ex was in touch with me on and off, which the man knew too. He used to call/message me when he was very low emotionally or terribly wrecked in a relationship. He had a couple of girlfriends. After we broke up, one fine morning, I called him, the ex, up. He was little low as his then girlfriend refused to spend the New Year's Eve with him and chose to go to some destination with one of his male friends, or something like that. I remember my exact words, Thank you for cheating on me. Thank you for breaking my heart. If you wouldn't have done all that, I would have never met Deepak, my husband, and wouldn't have realized that what love is and that I deserve love, happiness and moreover the respect. Thank you for pushing me away. This was almost 2 years back and that was the last time we spoke. He never contacted me post this conversation. So living well, and letting your ex know about it, is the best revenge. 7. Many people have already responded to this question, but I'll add my 2 cents. My husband left me for another woman 4 months after the birth of our son, by announcing that she was pregnant and he was going to live with her. We had been married for 10 years and he was the love of my life. I went through a very dark time, struggling to hold it together for the sake of our children. Is an experience you had at a courthouse that you'll never forget. 1. The experience was actually one my elderly mother had. She rented a house for 6 years without issue, and then chose to buy her own house. When she moved out of the rental, the landlord, Landwich, kept her deposit, and claimed that my mother had damaged/destroyed the carpet, appliances, doors, etc. The Landwich filed a small claims case against my mother for approximately $5,000. My mother had no court experience, so just showed up on the day of the case without an attorney. The Landwich seemed to be on good terms with the judge, and said that my mother effectively destroyed everything in the house that should have been depreciated, and was just about to get a ruling from the judge when a local attorney stood up behind my mother and requested a continuance since he had just taken the case. My mother was completely surprised, since she had never met the attorney. The judge granted a 1-week continuance. The attorney asked the landlord for all receipts for repairs/replacements, as well as for banking information for my mother's deposit. There were no receipts, only a list of items with dollar amounts, and the deposit was commingled with the landlord's accounts. On the court date, the attorney brought this information to the judge's attention, and asked for case dismissal and for my mother's deposit to be returned to her, with interest for the 6 years. Granted. When my mother asked him what she owed him, he said, nothing. He was there for another case, and she looked like she could use a little help. A true gentleman. 2. Oh my God, stop. Just stop. I don't care. The one and only time I've been in a courthouse was to get a restraining order against my ex-boyfriend. I was really nervous about going through with the whole thing, but a family friend who'd gone through divorce and court hearings and crazy men previously came over to visit me the evening before. Stay quiet, she advised me. Answer the judge's questions and then shut up. Let him, ex, hang himself. The day of the hearing, I did exactly what she advised. My ex, on the other hand, decided to do what he'd always done, which was to exhaust everyone in earshot with his endless self-justifying talk. However, he'd never run up against an actual authority figure before. I believe it was right about the time that he pulled out a 4-page letter that he fully intended to and began to read to me right then and there that the judge did a literal double facepalm and uttered the line above, much to my ex's displeasure. Of all of the feelings and actions I'd prepared myself to handle that day, the overwhelming desire to break into laughter was most definitely not among them. Have a beautiful day, Lydia. 3. My daughter was on a back road with a speed limit of 45. She passed a car that was tooling along at 30 miles per hour in a legal zone. As she went by, the car's flashers went on. He wrote her up for passing in a no-passing zone. She pointed out that it wasn't a no-passing zone, but he seemed to be upset that she'd passed him at all. So, she decided to go to court. She took photographs of the speed limit signs. Her brother took multiple satellite views that showed the lines on the road. I went over how one had to act in court. Don't call the policeman a liar, just show the information you have. Don't get upset. The judge will stop listening to you. So, we parked in the court parking lot. We went in and listened to the cases ahead of us. When they called her case up, she took her folder to the front of the court as the bailiff said, "The officer isn't in the courtroom." My daughter was still walking toward the defense table when the judge found in her favor. He looked at her then and said, "You had evidence?" From the aisle, she said, "Yes, Your Honor." "Well, you won your case. You're a heck of a lawyer," and went on to the next case. "The parking structure has us pay for time when we come in. Non-refundable." I still had 2.5 hours on my ticket. As I left the structure, I reached out to someone coming in and handed them my ticket so they now had 2.5 hours of free parking. 4. I got robbed when I was in college. While 2 guys were robbing me, their 2 buddies were robbing my neighbor. I figured out who one of them was, and gave his name to the cops. He and his buds were all arrested. I went to the trial to testify. We were all sequestered, so we sat in the hall outside the courtroom. Once we'd testified, we could stay and watch the proceedings. A couple of the defendants had character witnesses. A couple of those witnesses were jailbirds, surprise, and we're in the hall with us regular witnesses. Before I testified, I went to the bathroom to pee. A couple of the character witnesses were getting high in the bathroom. As I was walking out, an officer of the court was coming in, so I said I had nothing to do with the smell of weed in the bathroom. He laughed and said it happened all the time with jailbird witnesses. I testified, and then sat in the courtroom to watch. One of the robbers was a heroin dealer, so a lot of people didn't want him to be found guilty as he got them their drugs. The mother of the guy who robbed me tried to blame it all on her son because she was an addict and wanted the dealer to go free. So her son took a swing at the dealer in the courtroom. It was epic. Fun time in court. The guy who robbed me got 12 years. 5. When my son was about 6 months old, I got pulled over for going 5 miles over the speed limit at the college I attended. But I didn't get a ticket for that. I got a ticket because my insurance card was expired and I hadn't put the new insurance card in my wallet yet. I knew it would be a simple matter of showing the judge that I was actually covered at the time, and he'd throw out the ticket. So I brought my family along to the courthouse that day, assuming we'd knock this out real fast and go get breakfast. I guess I don't go to courthouses often, because the place was packed by 7 a.m. and I was forced to wait an indeterminate period before I could be seen by a judge. My son was unusually cranky that morning, and my wife was going to leave me to wait while she went shopping and just get my loud crying son out of there. But then I had an idea. I said, "Babe, just leave him with me," and she went to do her own thing, and I sat in the courtroom with my wailing baby. I wasn't neglecting him. I continued to comfort him, but he was just in one of those moods. Within just a few minutes one of the lawyers walked up and said, "Can we go ahead and get you out of here?" And that's how I turned a certain 4 to 6 hour wait at the courthouse into a 15 to 30 minute appointment. I walked up with my crying baby, showed the judge my insurance card, signed a piece of paper, and I was out of there in a flash. It's the only time I can truly say I was happy that my normally well-behaved son had a long crying fit in public. 6. So after my father-in-law died without a will, my husband filed for probate against his stepmom and got it. She was extremely uncooperative and filed a restraining order against both my husband and his 80-year-old grandmother. When they went to court, the judge looked at my husband and his grandmother and then said to my husband's stepmother, "Were you angry when you filed for this? Did you really need a restraining order?" She agreed. "Shit is the rudest thing you have experienced while eating dinner at a friend's house." 1. When I was about 10-11 years old, my friend Megan invited me to stay for dinner at her house. While my family wasn't poor, Megan's family was definitely more well off. I called my parents to ask permission and my dad said it was okay to have dinner at my friend's house, but he was making a roast, so I'd be missing out on a great meal. My dad was a great cook. When I found out Megan's mom was also making a roast, I thought it was a funny coincidence and told her my dad was making a roast too. She told me I was lying because we couldn't afford roast and men don't cook. I was taught not to talk back to or correct adults, so I just turned away and went back to playing with their dog. A couple minutes before dinner, I went to wash my hands and came back and everyone was seated in their chairs at the dinner table with china, silverware and glasses. They had a place setting for me with a paper plate, plastic utensils and a stool at an awkward corner of the table. They had more chairs and more dishes and silverware, but chose to treat me worse than themselves. I was raised to always give guests the best of what I had, so I felt especially bad sitting there on a hard stool eating with my paper and plastic while everyone else had dishes and silverware. When dinner ended, the house rule was that everyone had to put their dishes in the dishwasher. Well, I didn't have dishes, so I threw my paper plate and plastic utensils away. Then they served dessert, but not to me. The house rule is that you only got dessert if you put your dishes in the dishwasher. I didn't even have dishes, which I would have preferred and would have happily put everyone's dishes in the dishwasher. By the time my parents came to get me, I was on the verge of tears. I felt like I was being punished when I did nothing wrong. I later found out that other friends had the same experience when having dinner there, so it wasn't because I was rude or misbehaved. It was because they were jerks. 2. One time on a Jewish holiday, Elle went to dinner to a religious, Jewish, family's house. A young woman who came from a non-religious background arrived a bit later. I do want to point out that religious Jews have very strict laws about what they can and cannot eat. So anyway, this young woman, let's call her Susie, had put in tremendous effort to make a huge traditional dessert according to kosher law. Kosher means that it can be eaten. Everything was going fine until the son of the couple living in the house started whispering. Then Elle saw the mother walk over to Susie and whisper something in her ear. Susie became very upset, and asked me to step into the hallway with her. Apparently, the son of the household had deemed her food unfit for consumption. The food that she had worked so hard on. She asked me if Elle would take it home with me, and Elle said Elle would. We returned to the table and at some point an argument happened between me and the son. He claimed that he had made the right decision. I told him that he was wrong. Later Elle went to my rabbi and asked him about it. The rabbi said that the dessert absolutely should have been served, and that he would have had seconds of it. The spirit and law of Judaism looks more harshly upon humiliating and hurting someone's feelings than potentially eating non-kosher food. 3. When I was in college, I and a few other people from a class were invited to a mutual friend's house for dinner. My friend's parents were there and they were gracious and friendly hosts. Everything started off fine. We ate some delicious Italian food and talked about a bunch of different things. When it came time to clear the table, we all offered to help with cleanup and dishes. My friend, however, told us to sit down and had his parents clear the table. I thought that was really weird. Who makes their 55-year-old parents clean up after their adult friends? Perhaps we didn't have to help with the dishes, but we wanted to help clean up the table. After dinner, we went into his living room and continued chatting and started playing pool. His dad came in after cleaning up and I started to have a great conversation with him. He was a foreign policy expert and I was learning a lot in a subject of great interest to me. His son, my classmate/friend, comes over and says, "Come on dad, fuck off. Nobody wants to hear your boring government shit." The look on my face probably betrayed my shock at the disrespect he just showed his dad in front of us. I wasn't the only one with that look. The room fell silent. His dad looked embarrassed and said, "Come on kid, don't talk to me like that in front of your friends." His son replied, "Whatever dad, just go away." In my mind I was thinking, what the fuck? Who behaves like this with their dad? If I did something like that my dad would knock my block off and I'd deserve it. After that, all of us quickly wrapped up our conversations and left. We all came in one car for some reason. The conversation during the car ride back to campus was about how we were all shocked at how this guy behaved. Who the hell talks to their parents like that? And in front of company no less. We no longer talk to that miscreant. 4. Hubby and I were invited to his friend's house for a barbecue. I had never been to his house or met his wife. We get there, the friend is very cordial. We go into the backyard and there is one other couple there. We sit, chat a little, and have a soda. No wife to be seen. The friend throws some burgers and hot dogs on the grill. The wife finally comes out, looks at us, says, "Oh, so he does have friends." She then hands her hubby a pack of Nathan's hot dogs and says to him, "These are for me. Your guests can enjoy the other garbage." She plops down in the chair and turns it around to face her back to us. I got up, looked at my husband, and told him, "I'm out." He got up and the other couple got up. The other couple said they lived in the house behind them and invited us over. We took them up on their offer and so did the husband. We all left. It was awesome. She was screaming at her husband, but he just walked off with us. We had such a good time at the other house. I never walked back into that house. And my husband just maintains a telephone friendship with his friend. 5. My husband and I were invited to a coworker's house for dinner. They were nice enough and the dinner was good, but when we finished I helped carry the dishes into the kitchen. It was very apparent that she didn't clean as she cooked. The kitchen was a disaster. She turns to me and said, "I cooked. You clean." And then she left the kitchen. I looked at the huge mess. I washed my dish and my husband's, walked out of the kitchen and announced I was done and ready to leave as I wasn't feeling all that great. I was pregnant at the time so it was an okay excuse. I would have been more than happy to help with the total cleanup, but to be told I had the job of cleaning up while she sat and visited was just not going to happen. And if we had been close friends, instead of just coworkers, I probably would have even volunteered to clean it up on my own. But to be ordered to do it by someone I didn't really know was just too much. 6. It was eating at my house. A meal I cooked and served. Company knew I was an atheist. Never been shy about that. I was told they could not eat until I said grace. I told them I had no problem with them saying it. Wasn't my thing, but go ahead. Nope. Me being head of household I had to say it. This went back and forth a few times and I said I wasn't going to be a part of any pagan rituals, unless it involved a virgin, but they could talk to their plate, sacrifice a goat or whatever they wanted, but not my belief, and I will not be a part of it. I am going to eat. When I am done I am clearing the table. You do whatever you feel you have to do. The husband said a quick blessing and we ate. Bottom line, I will allow and defend your right to whatever religion you like, but do not force that belief on me, in my home. 7. My husband and I were invited to some friend's home for dinner. The hostess and her daughters were preparing the meal. The husband called me out for not helping. I was young and inexperienced so I didn't say anything. Growing up in the country, and having a lot of dinner guests, I had never experienced anything like this. My feelings were totally killed. That was over 50 years. The kitchen was full of help. When I'm cooking I want everyone to stay out of my way. If you want to set the table or pour the drinks or even help clean up afterward, that's okay. But you are my guest and I would rather concentrate on what I'm doing rather than delegating chores. If this were now, I would have gathered my husband and left. I have a friend who has her way of doing things, even down to loading the dishwasher, so I stay out of the way. If you are visibly disfigured or disabled and a random 3-year-old loudly asks their parents about you, what would you prefer the response of the parents to be? 1. I am not disfigured or disabled, but I will never, ever forget an encounter I had as a mom of that young child. We were in Target, and the cashier helping us had one eye, several facial disfigurements, one ear, etc., and a giant blue and green mohawk. My 3-year-old, of course, loudly exclaims, "Mama, Target has a pirate." While I tried to slowly disappear into the floor, this lovely gentleman kindly explains that he is not actually a pirate, but has a sickness that makes him look like that. He kindly answered my kiddo's questions. Does it hurt? Do you have a pirate ship? Where is your parrot? Does it make you see funny to only have one eye? Etc. I tried to make him stop, but this awesome cashier told me it was fine. He loved kids, and was happy to answer. As we walked away, my son, again, very loudly, exclaimed that was the nicest pirate ever, and I wasn't allowed to come to Target without him anymore because he wanted to say hi to nice Mr. Pirate Man. This experience is legit the only time in my life I have ever asked to speak to a manager. I told her how embarrassed I was, and how absolutely wonderful her employee had been, and how I sincerely apologized if he felt weird, awkward, or put on the spot. We said hi to nice Mr. Pirate Man multiple times in the following years, until he passed from complications from his illness. I hope nice Mr. Pirate Man felt as good about these encounters as we did. He was truly a lovely individual, and taught my kiddo very quickly that looking scary didn't mean that you were a bad person. 2. To start, I am an amputee. I lost my left arm in a motorcycle accident. This happens to me all the time at work. I work in the technology department for a school district and I go to all of our schools fixing teachers' computers. I can think of one incident that stuck with me. It wasn't really a parent, but a teacher teaching the kids a nice way to respond. So I walked into a first grade classroom full of kids, and as soon as I walked in, several students gasped and said he has no arm. The teacher quietly took me aside and asked if I minded participating in a lesson on manners. I agreed since I was used to people asking already. So the teacher called the class to attention and introduced me as the technology person who was here to fix her smartboard. She told them I had been in an accident and lost my left arm in the accident, and if anyone had any questions to ask them now. Of course several kids put their hands up and one asked how long had I been that way. Another asked how I tie my shoes. I told them that there are many ways to do the everyday things we all have to do. I had to figure out how to do things with one hand and many are a little different different than how they do things, but most are still doable. I then sat down and untied my shoe and showed them how I can tie my shoe with one hand. They all had a priceless look on their faces of amazement. Then came a ton of questions about how I do so many things. Typing was another one that they were amazed about. After they got all their questions answered, the teacher thanked me and so did the whole class, and I fixed her smartboard and she followed me to the door and thanked me again for my participation. Little kids don't usually see handicapped people as disabled. They just see us as a person who has a different configuration from them, and they are just curious. I always entertain the questions from everyone. I never take offense. Thanks. 3. My husband and I were riding on a train when a little boy asked his mother why I had a cane that clearly could not support my weight. The mother hushed her child and scolded him for saying such things out loud. I squatted down to the young's level and said, "I'm blind. This cane enables me to get around without stumbling into objects and falling off curbs." That made him laugh, as I made a gesture with my hands that depicted me stumbling off a curb. I then allowed the child to examine my cane. He swung it about and then asked about the ceramic tip I had on the end. I instructed him to close his eyes and tap the cane on the hard floor. He did. I asked him what he heard. I told him that the tip creates a sound that helps me determine what is around me, which is very useful when trying to find an open bathroom stall at a public restroom. He experimented some more and said, "Cool." He then gave my cane back. His mother thanked me for being so kind. I told her that it was important for people to know various aspects of disabilities because it creates an appreciation for something they have never experienced. My grandson has a blind student in his class. Because he has been around me and knows what blind people do to get around, he often offers the little girl help and accompanies her to classes. He said that most of the other kids avoid her, but he really likes spending time with her and playing on the playground together. The little girl told him that she wants to marry him someday. I think that I would prefer parents to encourage their children to ask the disabled person themselves about their curiosities. If done with respect, the response should be a positive one. On the other hand, there are many unhappy souls out there that may snap back, creating a wall to the child's inquiry. In that case, the parent may have to explain that some people are unhappy and respond in negative ways, but the child should not feel ashamed, only compassion for the unhappy person. 4. Whilst supporting a non-verbal autistic man in the supermarket, he had picked up some sweets and I nodded that it was okay to buy them, so he squealed with joy. Little girl said, "Mummy, look, that man is squealing very loud." Mum said, "Yep, he is. Why do you think that is?" Little girl said, "He got his sweeties." Mum said, "Yes, he did, didn't he? Do you think he's happy?" Little girl said, "Yes. Look at his lovely smile, Mummy." Mum said, "I am. Yes, he's happy, isn't he? How does that make you feel?" Little girl said, "Happy." Mum said, "Isn't it a good thing he was here then?" That, my friends, is parenting done right. 5. I'm a blind lady and I walk around with a white cane. Little kids don't know what a white cane is, and very often, they want one. The question is usually, "Oh, what does she have? Can I have one? What is it? I want it." I usually smile at the family and say something on the lines of, "Hi, I'm Krishna and this is a white cane. I'm a blind lady and I use my white cane to walk around safely." Little kids are often very ready to engage in conversation at this point. Good parents will let them have a short chat with me, ask me some questions, and maybe help guide the kid in a good line of questioning. I remember a little girl and her mom on the bus with whom I had a nice chat in which it was revealed that both the little girl and I owned white tutus. It was memorable, because not only did the little girl learn about mobility aids for blind/vi people, but also made a connection to me that was happy and fun. She will probably not feel uncomfortable the next time she meets a blind/vi person, and maybe will remember that fairy princess ballerina blind lady who laughed with her on the crosstown bus. However, not every encounter with little kids works out this way. Lots of parents gasp in terror and swat their kids away from me without answering their questions at all. One mom I overheard actually told her kids, "Be quiet, she can't see us." I overheard another mom say, "Leave her alone. It's very sad." The one who is my worst memory is a dad who said, "She must not be a Christian, or she would be healed by Christ." These kids will probably never ask their parents about white canes or blind people ever again. They will feel shame, fear, and discomfort, and will miss out on the company and friendship of very nice blind people. Always help your little one have a happy and age-appropriate interaction when they meet a disabled person. One of the most sweet, gentle, child-friendly people I know, and a mom of 2 teenagers, is a woman with burn scars over much of her body. Any 3-year-old would be lucky to have a little chat with her, and maybe a dance to some tunes from the iPhone. She looks different, and she is different, mostly because she is so very wonderful. Don't What is the most condescending advice you received from someone who assumed you were poorer or less educated than them? 1. It was my first day at a new hospital. I pulled into the lot, and parked in a spot reserved for physicians. I was a bit early, so I called my BFF, who is also an OB/GYN, and I was laughing and chatting with her when I hear an angry knock on my window. I turned to see a white male, in his late 50s to early 60s with his face twisted in anger. I rolled down my window and he begins shouting, "You can't park here. This is for physicians only." So I grab my badge, that's on a stretch string, and I place it about 1 centimeter from his face and say, "I think this gives me permission to park here, dude." No apologies. He just turns on his heels and walks away. Yes, black women can be physicians too. 2. I was walking my dog around the marina and I was going back to my dad's boat. I saw a couple standing next to it. I walked down to the end of the dock and the guy told me only boat owners are allowed on the docks, and I have to get out. Then he turned to the woman and was telling her about the places he's been on his boat, and how he has to find someone to clean it. All this time he was pointing at my dad's boat. I was just standing there wondering what's going on. Then he told me that if I'm lucky enough I'll find a rich guy like him, and told me to go away before he called security. The woman said I'll have to find some other guy because he's taken. She made a face at me and was hugging him. I tried going around them and he asked what I'm doing. I told him I was getting on my dad's boat, and they both laughed at me. Then Ed, one of the crew, came out from the back of the boat and told me dinner is ready. I told him I'll be right up as soon as these idiots got out of my way. I stuck my tongue out at the woman and said he's all yours. She got mad and walked away. The guy was following her and she kept yelling at him to stay away and how he's a fake. Tom, another crew, opened the side door and asked me what's going on. I said she didn't like him as much as she thought she did. 3. I was in my classroom after my class had left for the day. They had made a bit of a mess, so after I'd tidied the place, I got out the vacuum and began to run it around the room. I wanted it to look fresh for the new teacher's aide who I was going to interview that afternoon. A young man came in, looked at me, but didn't say a word, didn't introduce himself, just sat down at my desk. I asked him, "Can I help you?" He made an impatient gesture with his hand. "Just clean up and get out. I've got an interview with the head teacher at 4. I shrugged and got on with it. After about 5 minutes the room was clean and I put away the vacuum. As I was coming back to the room, the young man came out looking annoyed and said, "Look, pass on the message to the head teacher that he's late for our interview, so I'm leaving." I glanced at my watch, said, "I'm so sorry, but you did imply that you didn't mind waiting," as I was cleaning up. "It's now 4:05. He stared at me. "What's it got to do with you?" I held out my hand to shake his. "I'm the head teacher. Do you want to go back now for the interview?" He stared, then went several shades of red and left. Needless to say, if he'd stayed for the interview he would have had to be truly exceptional for me to overlook his silly gender bias that I was supposed to be a male, and his assumption that a head teacher can't clean up as well as a professional cleaner. And just for the record, our cleaner is male. 4. I was looking to buy an airplane hangar several years ago. Yes, there are airports where you can own them. It's a long story as to why I needed to buy one. A local real estate agent who owned a hangar at the airport at which I was interested in purchasing one met my real estate agent and me to show us several hangars that he had listed for sale, including his. This guy gets most of the hangar listings at the airport because he's already there, which makes good sense. A couple of them interested me, and I asked what the best price would be on the ones I liked. He asked me how much I wanted to pay. I'd done my research, and made what I thought was a fair verbal offer for each, which I was willing to put into writing for the first owner who might have had interest in my offer. Each offer was about 85% of the listing price. After a long verbal dissertation about how the airport worked and how pleasant hangar ownership was for those who could afford it, his advice to me was to come back when you get serious and can afford to buy. I did. I bought the hangar 2 doors down from his about a month later. It came up for sale and was listed with another agent, and the owner accepted my first offer. I ran into the guy while I was working at my new property a couple of weeks after closing. He remembered me and asked me if I was still thinking of buying a hangar. I told him no, I only needed one, and since I'd bought his neighbors, I was out of the market. The look on his face was priceless. 5. I once rolled up on a forklift next to a jackass in an off-the-rack suit and a 5-year-old Mercedes and asked him, nicely, to move his car because one of our incoming shipments was a mess and we needed some extra room to unload it. Guy took a look at my dirty hands and the Carhartts I was wearing and rolled his eyes. He moved, but growled that he was already late for an important meeting with my boss. He was there to sell us new enterprise software. The look on his face when I walked into our meeting 15 minutes late with the same dirty hands wearing the same Carhartts was precious, especially when my partners introduced me as the IT director. I wish I'd taken a picture. 6. I used to work in engineering, high-precision aerospace stuff. It just so happened that the majority of the people who worked there were men. In fact, I was one of only 3 women out of the 300 or so who worked there. We also all wore the same corporate clothing, which was nice because it made us feel like a team rather than managers versus shop floor. One incident stands out in my head. I was near the shop floor entrance chatting to one of the guys, when a couple from our new supplier walked in. One of them barked at me, "I've got an appointment to see the managing director," about some technical issues, whilst the other didn't even condescend to look at me. Despite his rudeness, I said, "Certainly sir, I'll take you up there." I settled them into the office, big office, very plush, and asked them if they'd like coffee. They nodded. Speaking was too much effort, and I served them freshly brewed coffee and expensive biscuits. "No, thank you, of course." Then I proceeded to introduce, "What is your idea of a perfect marriage?" 1. Based on personal experience, hubby said, "I'm going to get some groceries. Do you want something?" Wife said no. Hubby said, "Are you sure? Do you need any snack, cosmetic or toiletries?" Wife said no, "I've already given you the list." Hubby comes home after shopping. Hubby said, "Beta, see what all I've bought." Shows the bill to his 7 meters baby. Wife is listening him but pretends like she doesn't care. Hubby said, "This is Vico turmeric cream. Your mother's cream is over." I asked her if she needs anything. She told no, but today I saw her squeezing the empty tube. Beta. Mummy will never tell us she needs something, but she never forgets anything that we need. So when you grow up, have a look at her needs always, like I do now. Wife smiles but still pretends like she doesn't care. Marriage or any relationship needs acceptance. Once you accept someone as your partner, it means you accept them as they are. All you need to do is show some love and care. 2. I have seen one. It's our neighbors. They were married for 60 years. One day Grandpa had collapsed and was taken to the hospital. He stayed in the ICU, unconscious for 3 days. Grandma was so miserable that words couldn't express. The 3 whole days she stayed outside the ICU day and night and nobody could persuade her to go home. When he regained consciousness after 3 days, first thing he said, has she, his wife, eaten anything? She won't eat food without me. Please make her eat food. When she heard he regained consciousness, please take me home. He eat food cooked by me only. He can't eat hospital food. He died first in his sleep, and the very next day she died. 3. 1. Having awesome sex. 2. Both should be working. Not necessarily that the husband should earn more. We Indians should get over it. It is okay if the wife is earning more and husband is still struggling. There should be mutual respect. 3. Splitting the bills. I've seen so many marriages where only husband pays even though wife is working. Both should pay and buy a house contributing money. It is so sad that this does not happen. I would be blunt, but guys who are at good position in their career only want a good-looking wife no matter how dumb she is. Not everyone, but mostly looks is the priority. Hence, average-looking girl like us end up with person who don't deserve them. 4. Cooking together. Cooking together is the best thing. I would love if my husband cooks for me when I am not well or not feel like cooking. You don't know, boys, we don't need Zara clothes. Little love and we are all yours. Small things like making a cup of tea. 5. On Sundays, watching Netflix and sleeping the whole day, and eating comfort food. 6. Late night conversations about anything, or making bhajia and tea at 2 in the night, or maybe Maggie? As I mentioned bhajia, please don't consider that I have a crush on Akshay Tiwari XD. 7. Calling each other stupid, idiot, Mary Sherney, ABC maybe P, instead of Babu, Shona, baby, all that shit. 8. Respecting each other's family. 9. Loving each other for who they are. Loving each other's imperfections. 10. Giving each other hair oil massage. 11. Hitting gym together. Traveling together. 12. Letting me eat whatever I want. And yes, most importantly, biryani and cutting chai over Starbucks and some fancy continental food. 4. Most of the answers I read included only husband and wife. I will give a new line to story. No, it's not about their kid either. I am sitting at breakfast table. My dad's mom, serves the breakfast, cooked by my mom, and sits beside me. Before I can taste the first spoon, she whispers, actually the upma, Indian breakfast item, has little more salt in it today. Please don't start making a big fuss about it early morning. Your mom will feel bad whole day. No one does it on purpose. It happens. You can adjust for one day. I will get some potato chips for you to eat with it if you want. Don't be rude to your mom, please. I smiled back at my granny in admiration and wonder how lucky my mom was to get such a mother-in-law. ! I tasted and whisper back, you call this little more? Seriously? I wink at her and shout, Mom, breakfast is yummy. I am sure all Indians understand what I am talking about, because in India happy marriage is not just between husband and wife, it's also about equation with all family members. This is my life. 5. I am currently at hospital as my father is in ICU suffering from a severe burn. Waiting at the hospital premises, I met a person whose wife is 8 months pregnant and she got around 50% burn. This person has not gone home since his wife is admitted. It's been 28 days she has been hospitalized and each day she is enduring the immense pain. A burn patient is very critical. There is no continuous improvement. The condition of the patient keeps fluctuating minute by minute. The person is so hopeful that everything will be fine soon and he would take his wife home with his baby. He comes from a financially weak background, but he is ready to pay anything for his wife's health. This makes me feel marriage is not about having romantic dinners, lovely time, cuddling each other. It's about staying together through the tough times. There can be any unseen situation, but believing together we will face it all is important. Please keep my father in your prayers. He needs your support. 6. Where we can walk together holding hands, smiling at each other, in the toughest of days. Where money is not a source of fights or love it isn't relevant. Where we don't need exotic trips to celebrate love, sitting together, watching television and drinking tea work much better. Where we can shout at each other, promise to not talk ever and still wake up next morning smiling at each other. Where no one has the guts to fight with me if she is there. Where no one has the guts to disrespect her when I am there. Where her parents look upon me and my parents look upon her. Wherever after years of togetherness, seeing each other in the evening, alive and happy, is the most significant achievement in any day. Where each other's tears make us cry, we yawn together and laugh at each other's little miseries. Where age, looks, wrinkles, children, responsibilities increase the love for each other and not test it. Where two imperfect, immature kids create a perfect lifelong path together. I have felt all this and I can say that I can't imagine perfection beyond this simple life of togetherness. 7. I was scrolling through my Facebook feed watching random videos, when I came across a video posted by Daily Mail. Pregnant wife wakes up husband at 3 in the morning, tells him she is craving olives. Wife said, don't hate me, but can you please get it for me? Husband said, what time is it? Wife said, I would do it for you. Husband said, you would never get me a sausage roll at 3 in the morning. Wife said, are you growing a mini human in your body? Husband said, I am not going. Next thing we see, the poor guy is out in the cold on Mission Olives. He drives to more than 3 stores supposedly open 24/7, but finds all of them closed. He remembers about a Mark Spencer store 20 minutes drive from his location. Tries that too. But sadly, that too is closed. He is now talking to himself, why out of all things in the world, olives? Suddenly an idea strikes him and he starts driving. He gets down from his car and smiles. It's open. It's a pizza parlor. He walks in, orders a pizza with triple black olives, picks up the pizza, sits in his car, carefully picks up each and every olive from the pizza and collects it in a box. As soon as he reaches home, his wife comes running. She seems to be waiting like a little girl. She can't thank him enough for the olives. Now she is eating olives and he is eating the rest of the pizza. All of this at 3 in the morning. So yes, that is my idea of a perfect marriage. What has your child told you that caused you to call the police? 1. I was in the shower one day when my 7-year-old came in and said that there were 2 babies walking down the middle of the street. We were having a massive storm. Sure enough, I found a 21/2-year-old and an 11-mo walking down the street. I talked to the older one and asked where they lived and he showed me. When I got there, both mothers were passed out on the couch. I had to knock and yell to get their attention. The one grabs the baby and then smacks the older child so hard he flew over the coffee table. She was screaming at him that he was supposed to be watching the baby. How can a baby watch a baby? Exclamation mark yep. I called the cops and CPS. Don't regret it at all. 2. Several years ago my daughter, about 16 at the time, was talking with one of her friends online. The girl had taken some OxyContin and started telling my daughter how her vision was going in and out, and she felt like she was going to pass out. I asked about the girl's parents, but they were not home. By this time the girl was saying that she was scared she had taken too much. I called 911. Told them what was going on and gave them her address. Apparently the parents arrived home at the same time the police and emergency services got there. She was taken, by ambulance, to the hospital. It turned out she was fine. She told my daughter that she hadn't really taken anything, but was just saying that to see what she would do. I don't know if that was true or not, but my daughter no longer was friends with her. I'm sure she got into trouble with her parents, and possibly the police. Either way. 3. I have 13 kids. I have always wanted a big family. I adopted one from China. She is deaf and the sweetest 5-year-old ever. We adopted her when she was 3. We get a few racist remarks because we are black and she is Chinese. They think she needs a Chinese family to have a good life. She is happy with us. So nope. She can't talk because she is completely deaf and no hearing aids or a cochlear implant will help. She will be deaf forever, unless there is something invented in the future that helps. She is able to say mama because she reads our lips and tries to copy the shape our lips make and make sound. That's the only word she can say. She came home from school one day. Since she can read lips really good, she is in a hearing school, but in a special class for deaf people or hard of hearing people. She told her siblings, who then told us that her teacher told her she was sick in sign language, because she is from China. In sign language, you can't name a virus unless you fingerspell it. My daughter is only 5, so it's hard for her to put words together by spelling it out. Her teacher was telling her that she brought COVID into this world and that she was sick with it because it started out in China. She was only 2 when COVID started. She didn't even fully understand about COVID. The teacher believed every Chinese person had COVID, no matter how old or young. Since my daughter had COVID, she wasn't allowed to go to lunch that day and eat. She wasn't allowed to learn with the class, and she wasn't allowed to go outside and play. When they were learning, she was sitting in a chair far away with a mask on. I didn't call the police, but I called the school and got her fired, and she might be going to court for a hate crime. 4. My son, who is mixed race, told me that another boy at school was calling him names and throwing lighted matches at him, some of which could have burned his clothing with dire results. I called the police. They sent a very large and imposing officer who told us I'll take care of this, invited my 8-year-old son into the back of the police car and drove him to school, opening the door for him and escorting him to the principal's office to deal with the culprit. My son was thrilled that he was the talk of the school for arriving in a police car, and the bully was suitably scared out of his wits enough to never try such a thing again. 5. This didn't happen to me, but when my sister was about 13 she went outside to get something from the backyard. A few minutes later she came running in and slammed the door and locked it. Her face was white and she looked terrified. She came and told my mom that there was a man hiding behind our big tree in the backyard and she saw him just in time to get to the door before he got in. We were in a bad neighborhood and often got trespassers in our yard. So unless there was more of a problem than that, we didn't usually call the police. My mom just made sure everything was locked and told all of us to stay in the house for the night. But just a short time later that same night we were watching the show America's Most Wanted and a man's face popped up on the TV and my sister screamed that it was the same man in our backyard. The show said he was wanted for murder. That's when my mom called the police and they ended up catching the man because they found him in the area. 6. This is kind of the same thing, but the school called the cops on me. This was during quarantine. I'm a senior, so I've been applying for scholarships as most seniors do. I was applying for multiple scholarships and one required we write a PSA, public service announcement, and I chose the topic mental health awareness. There was a whole list. I've lost people I'm close with to suicide and I know people who struggle with mental health illnesses. So it's 2 a.m. on a Thursday night, I'm writing away. I looked up some facts about different illnesses and the crisis hotline and the nation's suicide prevention hotline. I started to get tired and went to bed, no biggie. So the next day I'm doing homework and chores and I was having a bad migraine and my knee injury was killing me. I took some Tylenol and took a nap. I woke up around 8:30 and went to go eat dinner. At around 9 I see my dog looking out the window getting jumpy, so I look out the window and sure enough there are police cruises outside my house. As a typical teenager I'm flipping out like, oh my, what are they here for? Oh boy, I'm in so much trouble. They pull my mom outside and talk for about 5 to 10 minutes, then she comes inside and calls for me. me. The cops was like, hi, are you Savannah? I'm like, yeah, hi. He goes, how are you feeling? I'm like, tired, sick, my head's pounding and got a hurt knee, but other than that I'm living the dream. He goes, are you okay? You're not hurt? I said no. Question mark. He asked like 5 more times before I said, what's going on? He said the school called saying I was suicidal and looked up the suicide hotline last night. I explained what had happened and the truth behind it all, and he laughed, said okay, sorry for the misunderstanding, and left. 7. My daughter told me a 16-year-old male student was trying to get a 6-year-old female student to touch it. This is a rural county school. K-12 ride buses. It's a very long route. Short-staffed. Very hard to find drivers. Substitutes are taking turns driving, so they don't know the students or routes well. Roads are curvy, hilly, uneven, poorly maintained, trucking route, timber and quarry. Not safe to be looking in the mirror. Many creeks. Have to go over narrow, rickety old bridges. Driver has enough to worry about. I can't imagine driving a bus. I drove a truck. Nerve-wracking enough. One driver had panic attack and had to pull over and wait for another driver. Supposed to be a second adult on bus, almost never happens. Lucky to have drivers at all. Very little adult supervision on an hour-long ride. My daughter was 11. My sons were 13, 15. They verified the kid is creepy. I felt compelled to report this. First of all, he's 16. Obviously going to be a predator, will have other victims. Secondly, my daughter said the girl was not only 6 but maybe a little special needs. Didn't seem to understand it was bad. Likely wouldn't have told her mom or known not to do it. In her eyes, he's an adult. But I had no idea what hell this would bring down on us. I don't want to say from now on I'll keep my mouth shut. But let's just say, next time I'll find another way to handle it than going to the proper channels. Maybe I'll just tell some good old boys and her daddy and let them sort it out. But I'll never call cops again. Even if I'm on fire.